Part 1. The Greyhound bus let out a long hiss, the compressed air escaping from the brake system, sounding like a snake slithering over gravel. The door opened. Jack Reacher stepped down. The soles of his shoes hit the wet asphalt. It was raining. The cold October raindrops stung his face, but Reacher did not blink. He stood still, taking a deep breath of the gasoline, mixed with the musty smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The bus doors closed, the engine roared, and it rolled away, leaving a thick cloud of black diesel smoke hanging in the night. Reacher watched the two red taillights until they disappeared around the bend of Highway 6. He was left alone. Surrounding him was darkness. In front was a rusted sign, leaning 15 degrees toward the roadside Griffin's Ridge. Population 2,104. The clock in Reacher's head read 11:42 p.m. He wasn't wearing a watch, but he knew that number was accurate. He had no luggage, no backpack, no suitcase. In the pocket of his canvas jacket was only a folding toothbrush, an ATM card, and an expired passport. He stretched out his hand. His thick fingers crackled. He stood 6 feet 5 inches tall, weighing 250 pounds. As he stood under the flickering streetlight, his shadow stretched long across the puddle, large and motionless like a slab of granite. Reacher needed coffee. He adjusted his collar and began striding toward the faint neon light 300 meters away. The town was silent. The shops were tightly shut, metal grates pulled down to the ground. Only one place was still open. An old-fashioned diner, an aluminum train car wrapped in chrome with pale yellow light spilling through the fogged glass. Reacher pushed the door open and stepped inside. The wind chime jingled above him. The air inside was thick with the smell of fried oil and stale cigarettes. The linoleum floor was a black and white checkerboard peeling at the corners. There were 3 people in the diner. A weary waitress behind the counter wiping a glass with a grimy towel. 2 men sat at the far corner table, their backs to the door. Reacher chose a stool at the bar the farthest from the window, a strategic position. He could observe the entrance and have a view of the entire room. The waitress approached. The name tag on her pink uniform read Betty, about 40 years old, crow's feet. At the corners of her eyes, her fingers stained yellow from cigarette smoke. "What can I get you?" she asked, not looking him in the eye. "Coffee," Reacher said. "Black, hot, the biggest cup you have. Anything to eat. Scrambled eggs, 4 of them, bacon, toast burnt on the edges." Betty nodded, jotting it down in her small notebook before turning to shout into the kitchen. Reacher sat still. He placed both hands on the cold table. He listened. The 2 men in the corner were talking, their voices low, murmuring. Reacher focused his hearing, filtering out the sound of the vent fan whirring on the ceiling. 2 days now, the man on the left said. He wore a plaid sweatshirt, a baseball cap pulled low. Zane's wife, still no sign. Probably ran off with some guy. The man on the right scoffed. This one was bigger, dressed in work clothes. That woman looking like that. Zane's just a dried-up husk. Reacher did not turn his head. He noted the name, Zane. 2 days, missing. Coffee was placed in front of him. A thick ceramic cup chipped at the rim. The coffee was dark and steaming. Reacher lifted the cup and took a large sip. The hot liquid burned down, his throat bitter. Caffeine began to course through his blood. Fuel. He finished his meal in 6 minutes. Efficient. Protein and carbs fueling his biological reactor. $4.80, Betty said as she cleared the plate. Reacher pulled out a $5 bill and placed it on the table. "Keep the change." He stood up. The 2 men in the corner fell silent, staring at him. Reacher occupied space. In this cramped diner, his presence made the air feel thinner. He glanced at them. Quick analysis. The man in the cap had a slight tremor in his left knee, weak ligaments. The worker had calluses on his thumb and index finger. Mechanic, or someone who used wrenches a lot. Not a threat. Reacher stepped outside. The rain had intensified. The wind blew hard from the north, carrying the cold moisture from the river flowing through the edge of town. He intended to find a cheap motel sleep for 6 hours, but something held him back. Far away by the riverbank, the blue and red headlights were flashing through the trunks of the old oak trees. No sirens. only the rotating lights cutting through the darkness. The police. Reacher did not like the police. He was a former military police officer, having commanded the Special Investigation Unit number 110. He knew how the police operated. When they turned off the sirens and only turned on the lights, it meant the situation was already settled. There was nothing left to salvage, only the scene to clean up. Professional curiosity surged, a hard habit to break. Reacher pulled up his collar and walked toward the riverbank. He moved in the darkness, his footsteps so light that they made no sound on the wet gravel, despite his body weighing more than 100 kilograms. The scene was located in a small floodplain where the swirling water created a quiet bay. The reeds grew taller than a person's head. 3 police cars were parked haphazardly. An ambulance was backing in its wheels, spinning in the muddy ground. The headlights of the police cars shone directly onto the water's surface. Reacher stopped behind a large oak tree, 50 meters away, a perfect vantage point. About 6 people were standing at the water's edge. 2 were in uniform. One man in civilian clothes, wearing a raincoat, had a commanding presence. A forensic doctor was carrying a toolkit, and another man, Reacher squinted. The other man was wearing an expensive cashmere coat, soaked through. His trousers, once neatly pressed, were now caked in mud. He stood apart, his hands hanging limply, shoulders slumped, the posture of defeat. He was undoubtedly the husband, Zane. Under the headlights, the dark water rippled. 2 rescue workers were pulling something onto the shore. A white object, a corpse. Reacher observed. Female, dark blonde hair, matted with mud, completely naked. The pale skin stood out against the withered reeds and the black water. No clothing. This was unusual. October. The water temperature was about 14 degrees Celsius. No one swims naked at this hour in this season, Reacher calculated. The position of the corpse, the fingers curled. Rigor mortis, had it completely disappeared or not yet begun? No looking at the bloating of the skin, she had been underwater for at least 2 weeks. But if she had been underwater for 2 weeks, the body should have surfaced earlier, unless weighed down by something heavy or caught in tree roots. The man in the cashmere coat, Zane, staggered forward. The officer held him back. "Don't look, Mr. Zane," the officer said, his voice carried away by the wind, but Reacher still heard. "You'd better not look." Zane nodded, but his eyes remained glued to the white corpse. Reacher saw his jaw twitch, not from crying. Reacher did not see any tears. It was mechanical tension, fear, or relief, too far to conclude. Reacher needed to get closer. He stepped out from the shadow of the tree, walking straight toward the crowd. A young police officer guarding the perimeter turned around, startled to see a large figure emerging from the rain. He placed his hand on the gun holster at his hip. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice cracking with tension. "Restricted area! Who are you?" Reacher did not stop. He took 3 more steps until he was only 2 meters away from the officer. He looked down. The officer was 175 centimeters tall, skinny, with the insignia on his shoulder soaked. "Just passing through," Reacher said. His voice was deep and cold, overpowering the sound of the wind whistling through the reeds. "This is a crime scene." The officer tried to regain authority, but Reacher saw his hand trembling on the gun's grip. "Get out of here before I cuff you." The commanding officer in the raincoat turned around. He was tall, bald, with sharp eyes under the brim of his hat. He looked at Reacher, making a quick assessment. Size, composure, not a local. "What's going on?" Burns, the commanding officer, asked. "This guy is loitering here, Captain Lohman," the young officer reported. Lohman stepped forward. He shone a flashlight into Reacher's face. Reacher did not squint. "You're not from around here," Lohman said. "A statement?" Reacher said nothing. "What are you doing at Griffin's Ridge in the middle of the night?" The bus stopped. "I'm getting off," Reacher replied. Lohman looked down at Reacher's shoes, worn but sturdy. Then he looked up at his hands, faint scars on the knuckles, signs of past violence. "Name Reacher. Last name or first name? Both." Lohman snorted. He turned to the body being placed on the stretcher. The yellow plastic sheet was draped over it, hiding the pale skin. "A woman washed ashore," Lohman said, his eyes still fixed on Reacher. "Naked. And you show up just as we pull her out." Quite a coincidence, isn't it? I like coincidences, Reacher said. But I just arrived in town 15 minutes ago. Betty at the diner can vouch for me. Lohman was silent for a moment. He was considering. Reacher stood there calmly. He knew Lohman wouldn't do anything. No evidence, no motive. And, more importantly, Lohman was the kind of seasoned cop who knew when to stir trouble and when not to poke a hornet's nest. Check his ID, Burns, Lohman ordered, then turned back to the husband. Mr. Zane was standing like a statue next to the ambulance. His face was ashen. Is that Steffi? Zane asked, his voice trembling. Is it Steffi? We need you to identify her, Mr. Zane, Lohman said, his tone softening a bit, but still official. I know this is difficult. Zane stepped forward, his trembling hand reaching out to lift the sheet covering her face. He stopped midway, retracting his hand as if it had touched fire. She isn't wearing anything, Zane whispered. No cloth covering, Lohman confirmed. No way, Zane shook his head, his eyes wide, staring into the void. Steffi would never. She's a modest person. She never bathes in the river, especially not at this time of year. Reacher observed Zane's body language. Shoulders hunched, neck drawn in, a defensive posture. He was protecting something, not pain. Pain makes people surrender, opens their bodies to receive comfort. Zane was curling up. He was scared. We'll talk later, Lohman said. Go home, Arthur. Come to the station tomorrow morning. Zane nodded vigorously, then turned and hurried toward the black Mercedes parked on the roadside, not once looking back at his wife's body. Reacher watched the luxury car roll away, the tires crunching the gravel. A new Mercedes S-Class in this poor town. Another anomaly. The young officer Burns returned the passport to Reacher. It's expired, he said. I know Reacher took it, stuffing it into his pocket. Get out of here, Burns said. And don't let me see you hanging around here again. Reacher didn't respond. He turned away, walking toward the distant streetlight. The rain continued to fall, cold and steady. A woman washed ashore, naked. A husband more scared than sorrowful. A suspicious chief of police. Reacher knew he should catch the next bus at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Leave this damp town. Not his business. But in his mind the numbers were dancing. 2 weeks. 14 degrees Celsius. No clothes. Something was not right. And Reacher hated things that were not right. He always wanted to fix them. The clock in his head read 12:15 a.m. A new day had begun, and Reacher decided he would stay, at least until he had another cup of coffee. Part 2. Reacher found a motel 2 miles north of the town center. The neon sign flickered the word motel with the letters O and E burned out, leaving MTL. The name Blue Horizon was scrawled in shaky handwriting on a rotting wooden plank hanging loosely below. The reception office reeked of cheap bleach and damp carpet. The night clerk was a chubby guy with greasy skin glued to a black and white TV showing a sitcom from the 80s. $45, the guy said without looking up. Pay in advance, no refunds, check out at 11 a.m. Reacher placed 2 $20 bills and 1 $5 bill on the scratched plastic countertop. I need the ground floor. At the back, the chubby guy tossed a key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag onto the desk. Room number 6. The ice machine is broken. Reacher took the key. He stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture. Room number 6 was in the farthest corner of the building. Reacher opened the door and turned on the light. A bare 60-watt bulb illuminated the 12-square-meter room. The double bed sagged in the middle. There was a table, a chair, and a nightstand. No wall art. The brown carpet was dingy with a few burn marks from cigarettes. Reacher checked the room according to standard procedure. He looked under the bed, checked the window lock, inspected the bathroom. No hidden cameras, no listening bugs, and, thankfully, no bed bugs. He wedged the chair against the doorknob, a simple but effective mechanical alarm system. If anyone tried to open the door, the sound of the chair scraping against the floor would wake him before the intruder could step inside. He took off his shoes, placing them neatly next to the bed, toes pointing toward the door. He removed his jacket and folded it into a pillow. He lay down, closed his eyes. The clock in Reacher's head read 1:15 a.m. He commanded his brain, "Wake up at 6." He fell asleep within 30 seconds. No dreams. 6 a.m. Reacher opened his eyes. The gray light of dawn was seeping through the gap in the plastic curtain. He lay still for 10 seconds, listening to the sounds of the world outside. The sound of a pickup truck starting in the parking lot, water running through rusty pipes, the cawing of crows outside the dump. He sat up, stretched. His joints cracked satisfyingly. He went into the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and used a folding toothbrush to brush his teeth. He did not shave. The stubble from one day made him look even more menacing. Reacher got dressed again. He needed coffee, and he needed answers to the arithmetic problems stuck in his head since last night. He returned to the diner at 6:30. Betty was still there or had come back for the morning shift. She looked a little more alert. "Coffee," Reacher said as he sat down in his usual spot. "And a muffin." The diner was busier than the night before. Mostly workers, truck drivers, and a few local elderly people. Reacher felt the wary eyes boring into his back. In a small town, a stranger is like a foreign virus invading the body. The town's immune system was beginning to react. Reacher took his first sip of coffee. Black, hot, strong enough to wake up the neurons. He recalled the words of Sheriff Loman and Zane's reaction. The body had been underwater for 2 weeks. That was the preliminary statement from the coroner, or Loman's assessment based on the state of decomposition. Steffi Zane had been missing for 2 days. That was what the guy in the baseball cap had said last night, and that was the time frame Zane implied when he talked about his wife never bathing in the river. If his wife had been missing for 2 weeks, he should have reported it to the police long ago. If he just reported it 2 days ago but the body had been dead for 2 weeks, then there was an unexplainable gap of 12 days. Unless the woman in the river was not Steffi Zane, or Zane was lying, or forensic science is wrong. Reacher trusts physics and biology more than human testimony. Low water temperatures slow down the decomposition process, but the saponification of subcutaneous fat in cold water creates a waxy layer. The pale white color he saw last night fits that. 2 weeks is a reasonable time frame. Reacher finished the muffin. He left money on the table and stood up. He needed to return to the riverbank. During the day, the crime scene looked more bare and mundane. The yellow police tape reading "Do Not Cross" hung down, fluttering in the gentle breeze. The crowd had dispersed. Tire tracks were imprinted in the muddy ground. Reacher crawled under the tape. He didn't care about authority. He cared about data. He stood at the water's edge where the body was pulled up. The river flowed sluggishly, the water a murky brown. He looked upstream. The current wound around a bend about 200 meters away. On the opposite bank was sparse forest. On this bank were thick bushes and a small path leading to the main road. If she fell into the water, she must have fallen from upstream. But if she was thrown in, the perpetrator had to choose a place easily accessible by car. Reacher looked down at the trampled reeds. He squatted closely, observing the layer of mud. The rain had erased many traces, but the weight of a person still left compressions in the soil structure. He saw a deep, hoof-shaped impression, a heel, large size, not police shoes. Police shoes have molded rubber soles. This mark was sharper. Hard-soled leather shoes. "The police are gone," a voice called out from behind him. Reacher was not startled. He stood up slowly, turning around. An old man was sitting on an overturned paint can about 10 meters away with a fishing rod stuck in the ground. He wore a holey sweater, a gray wool hat, and his face was wrinkled like a dried apple. "I know," Reacher said. "You're not a cop," the old man said, his eyes still staring at the red buoy bobbing on the water's surface. "You're too big to be a cop. And you don't have that smell." "What smell?" "The smell of fear and old donuts." Reacher stepped closer. He stood 3 feet away from the old man. A respectful distance, but close enough to intervene if necessary. "Are you the one who found her?" Reacher asked. The old man spat on the grass. "Otto. My name is Otto. Yeah, I found her. Early yesterday morning. Thought it was a pile of drifting snow. But there's no snow in October. So I pulled it closer." What did she look like? White, cold, and dead, Otto said bluntly, eyes wide open, as if she was looking at me asking, "Why are you fishing here, Otto? Did you see her clothes? Nothing at all, naked as a jaybird, like Eve before she ate the apple." Otto turned to look at Reacher, his cloudy eyes squinting. But there was something strange. The police didn't care, but I saw. What was it? Her hand, Otto said, raising his bony hand to demonstrate, curled up, long nails. And on her right index finger, the nail was broken backward, bent all the way back, painful even in death. Reacher nodded. Signs of resistance. She must have clawed at something before dying, or while dying. And there was a thread, Otto continued, stuck in that broken nail, white, tiny. Lohman said it was algae, but I know algae. I've fished in this river for 60 years. Algae is slimy. That was dry. It was cotton. A cotton thread. Reacher noted it. A white cotton thread. A broken nail. Thank you, Otto, Reacher said. What are you going to do? Otto asked. I'm going for a walk. Reacher turned his back and walked toward the main road. A white fiber. It did not belong to the victim's clothing, as she was naked, so it must belong to the attacker, or to an item used to restrain her. Medical cotton bandages. Reacher walked along the road leading into town. He needed to find out about Arthur Zane. He saw a large billboard erected at the intersection a mile from the scene. The billboard depicted a stylized white mouse with red eyes, below which were the words Zane Biological Supplace, providing solutions for the future of medicine. Reacher stopped. Laboratory mouse, he muttered. A police patrol car approached from behind, slowing down to match his pace. The window rolled down. It was Burns, the young officer from last night. I thought I told you to get out of here, Burns said, his left hand resting on the steering wheel, his right casually on his thigh, near his gun holster. Reacher kept walking, not looking over. This is a public road. The car accelerated slightly, blocking Reacher's path, forcing him to stop. Burns got out. He wore a police cap and sunglasses despite the lack of sun. He wanted to assert his authority. In Griffin's Ridge, every road is mine, Burns said, stepping closer to Reacher, his chest puffed out. Lohman might be polite, but I'm not. You're a drifter. We don't like drifters. Reacher looked down at Burns. He noticed the rapid pulse in the cop's neck. Burns was scared but tried to hide it with aggression. A dangerous combination. What time is the next bus? Reacher asked, his tone calm. 2 p.m. Burns sneered. But I don't think you'll be able to wait that long. I could arrest you right now for obstructing an officer or loitering. Burns reached out, intending to shove Reacher in the chest, a foolish, provocative gesture. Reacher did not back down. He did not swat his hand away. He simply let his steel-like chest absorb the push. Burns felt as if he were pushing against a giant tree. He lost his balance and staggered slightly. Don't touch me, Reacher said. His voice dropped a tone. Dangerous. Burns flushed. He drew his baton, clicking it open. The steel baton extended with a sharp clack. You like to play tough, huh? Burns hissed. Reacher calculated. A distance of 1.5 meters. Burns was right-handed. His weight was on his left leg. He would swing the baton diagonally from above, aiming for Reacher's collarbone or head. Reacher waited. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. Burns swung his arm, just as expected. A clumsy, furious strike lacking technique. Reacher stepped forward, a small step penetrating the inner circle of the swing. His left hand lightly deflected Burns's forearm, redirecting the force outward. At the same time, his right hand delivered a short hook punch to Burns' right side, just below the Kevlar vest. A grunt echoed. Air was expelled from Burns' lungs. He doubled over, eyes rolling back, the baton clattering to the pavement. Reacher did not follow up with more blows. He did not need to. That punch had incapacitated Burns' groin for at least 5 minutes. Reacher picked up the baton, shortened it, and tucked it into the belt of Burns, who was kneeling on the ground. 2 p.m., Reacher said. I will consider it. He stepped over the police officer and continued walking toward the town center. He did not run. He did not look back. Now he had an enemy, and he had a name, Zane, and a clue, the fiber. The case had officially begun. Part 3. The Griffin's Ridge Public Library is a red brick building built in the 30s, nestled behind the town hall. The smell of old paper and book glue hit Reacher's nose as soon as he pushed the door open. Quiet, dusty. He did not need a library card. He only needed the phone directory and a map pinned to the wall. Reacher quickly flipped through the yellow directory. Entry for Zane Arthur, 10 Grafton Street, Zane Biological Supplies. An old industrial area warehouse, number 4. He memorized the 2 addresses. Then he turned to the map. Grafton Street is located in the eastern area, reserved for the town's upper class. Houses with iron gates and private driveways. The industrial area is in the west, near the riverbank, upstream from where the body was found. Reacher mentally drew a straight line connecting 3 points: Zane's warehouse, Zane's house, and the sandbank where the body was found. An uneven triangle. He left the library at 8:15. Next destination, the local doctor's office. If the white thread Otto found is medical cotton, he needs to confirm it. He cannot consult the police's forensic doctor. That guy is on Lohman's side. Reacher needs an independent opinion. He found the clinic at the end of Main Street, a wooden sign carved with the words Dr. Helen Cragg, Veterinary and General Practice. A strange combination, often seen in rural areas, lacking manpower. The doctor treats both people and livestock at the same time. Reacher walked in. The waiting room was empty. A tabby cat was sleeping on the reception desk. From the examination room inside came the sounds of metal clinking and water running. Reacher tapped his fingers on the counter. 3 sharp knocks, not, crisp. The door to the inner room opened. A woman stepped out, just removing a pair of blood-stained rubber gloves. She was about 35 years old. Short, neat, brown hair, a white blouse over a black t-shirt and jeans. She looked at Reacher unafraid, her gaze traveling from his muddy shoes up to his bruised face. "If it's a dog that's been run over, take it out the back," she said. Her voice was hoarse, smelling of cigarettes and antiseptic. "If it's you that's been run over, go to the county hospital 20 miles away. I don't treat strangers without insurance." "I need information," Reacher said. "I'm not a directory service." Reacher pulled a piece of tissue from his jacket pocket. He had wrapped the evidence Otto had given him in it. In fact, Otto hadn't given him the evidence, he had only described it. But Reacher needed to test her knowledge. "A white cotton thread," Reacher said. "Rough fiber, non-woven, found under a broken fingernail." Helen Cragg squinted. She tossed the gloves into the medical waste bin and stepped closer. She took the symbolic piece of paper, looked at it, even though there was nothing on it, then looked directly into Reacher's eyes. She understood he was playing a guessing game. "Under a fingernail," she asked, "of a drowned corpse." Helen's expression hardened. She crossed her arms over her chest. "You're talking about the Zane case. You know, the whole town knows. Rumors spread faster than bird flu," Helen said. She leaned against the counter. "Rough cotton under the nail. If the nail was broken backward, it means the victim clawed in desperation. That cotton didn't come from clothing. Why, clothing uses woven fibers. Rough cotton is usually used for medical purposes. Absorbent cotton, or..." She paused, thinking, "cotton used for filtering in laboratories, or lining in cheap bandages." "What does Arthur Zane do?" Reacher asked. "He supplies laboratory animals, white mice, rabbits." "2 pharmaceutical companies," Helen replied, her voice dripping with disdain. "He keeps them in the warehouse in the west. He fancies himself a scientist. Does he have any medical knowledge? He likes to pretend to be a doctor. He often comes here to ask for anesthetics or antibiotics for his rats. I chased him away." Helen looked at Reacher more closely. "Who are you, Reacher? Undercover cop?" "No, good. Because I hate cops," Helen said. She reached for a pack of cigarettes on the shelf and lit one. "Steffi Zane was a good woman, too good for Arthur. She once brought her old dog here to be euthanized. She cried for 2 hours straight. A person like that wouldn't commit suicide." "Why do you think it was suicide?" That's what Lohman is trying to conclude. "Depression leads to reckless behavior." Bullshit. Helen exhaled smoke towards the ceiling. Arthur Zane is a weak man, but he's ruthless. The kind of guy who would kick a dog when no one is watching. Does he have any recent injuries? Reacher asked. If she scratched him? I haven't seen him in a month. But if you want to find him, don't go to his house. He won't be home. Where is he? The warehouse. He always hides there when he's in trouble. Among his rats. Reacher nodded. Thank you, Doctor. Hey, Reacher, Helen called back as he turned away. Loman and Arthur Zane. They are distant cousins. Birds of a feather. Watch your back. Reacher didn't turn back. My back is broad, hard to slip. Reacher left the clinic, 9:15. He walked westward. Helen Craig's information was a crucial piece. Medical cotton warehouse. The family relationship between the sheriff and the suspect, a closed system. Reacher walked along the dirt sidewalk of the highway, keeping out of sight of the patrol cars. He watched the trucks carrying lumber rumble back and forth. The industrial area emerged from the morning fog. Rusty corrugated metal warehouses, 2-meter-high B-40 chain-link fences. Zane's warehouse was at the end of a dead-end road. A gray concrete building, windowless, with a huge ventilation system whirring on the roof. A foul smell rose strongly. The stench of rat droppings, ammonia, urine, and rancid animal feed. Reacher crouched behind an abandoned container truck 100 meters from the main gate. He observed. There were 2 vehicles parked in the yard, a small white truck and Zane's black Mercedes that he saw last night. The gate was locked. No security. Zane was confident in the isolation of this place. Reacher calculated his entry options. The chain-link fence was easy to cut, but he had no pliers. Climbing over would leave traces. He saw a rainwater drain pipe running from outside through under the fence into the yard, 60 centimeters in diameter, wide enough. Reacher took off his jacket, wrapping it tightly around himself to avoid scratches. He crawled into the pipe. Inside was pitch dark, damp, and smelled of death. He crawled on his elbows and knees, counting his breaths to stay calm in the cramped space. 30 meters. He emerged on the other side, lying flat in the tall weeds growing in the yard. He was inside. Reacher surveyed the building. There was a steel side door on the right flank. He moved quickly, hunched low, using empty barrels for cover. He reached the door. The doorknob was icy cold, deadbolt locked. Reacher stepped back. He observed the hinge. The hinge was exposed, a fundamental design flaw. He pulled a flat metal bar from his pocket, a fork he had borrowed from the diner that morning. He wedged the handle of the fork into the hinge pin and stomped down hard with his heel. Click! The hinge pin popped out. He did the same with the lower pin. Reacher lifted the door out of the frame and gently set it aside. He stepped inside. Inside was a long corridor with rows of stacked metal cages reaching up to the ceiling on either side. Thousands of white rats. Their eyes were bright red. They scurried back and forth, clawing at the wire mesh, creating a sound like rain on a tin roof. The stench here was thick, palpable in the air. Reacher moved deeper inside. At the end of the corridor, fluorescent light spilled out from an office made of glass. He heard voices. Reacher pressed against the wall, moving silently on the soft rubber soles of his shoe. "Can't hold on any longer," Arthur Zane's voice. Hyde panicked. "That bitch. She knows too much." "Calm down, Arthur." Another voice, deeper, colder, the voice of a professional. "You've done your part. Now, let me handle the cleanup." Reacher squinted through the dirty glass. Arthur Zane was sitting at a desk, his hands clutching his head, a bottle of whiskey placed in front of him. The other man was leaning against a filing cabinet. He was tall and thin, wearing a well-tailored but old gray suit. His hair was white, cut short in a military style. He was cleaning a silenced pistol with a piece of white cotton. Reacher's eyes focused on the cotton. Coarse fibers, degreased cotton. Cotton that has been degreased for cleaning weapons or medical equipment. The silver-haired man looked up as if sensing Reacher's gaze through the glass. He stared straight out into the dark corridor, the reflexes of a hunter. "We have a visitor, Arthur," the silver-haired man said, lowering the gun to his side naturally. Reacher knew he had been spotted. The element of surprise was gone. He stepped out of the shadows, standing in the corridor with his hands at his sides. The space was cramped. The passage between the two rows of rat cages was only 4 feet wide. Arthur Zane Reacher said, "I have a few questions about your wife." The silver-haired man smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And who are you, the giant from last night, Reacher?" "I am Loras," the silver-haired man said. He raised the gun, a Walther PPK, 7.65mm caliber, homemade silencer, effective range, 15 meters, current distance, 8 meters. Reacher Loras said, his finger resting on the trigger. "You picked the wrong day to visit the zoo." The clock in Reacher's head registered 9:45. He calculated 8 meters. Time for the bullet to travel 0.02 seconds. Time for him to charge 1.5 seconds. The math did not favor him, but physics might. Next to Reacher was a feed sack holder. Each sack weighed 50 pounds. Loras squeezed the trigger. Pop! The sound of the explosion was small, like the opening of a champagne bottle. At the same time, Reacher kicked hard at the leg of the stand. Part 4. The 7.65mm bullet flew into a sack of animal feed. There was no loud bang, just a muffled thud as the bullet penetrated the thick burlap and was stopped by 50 pounds of tightly packed corn. The kinetic energy was dissipated. Corn dust burst out like a small, pale yellow mushroom cloud. Reacher did not stop. As the steel stand crashed down onto the floor with a deafening clatter blocking Loras's view, Reacher moved. He charged through the cloud of dust. A mass of 113 pounds moving at the speed of a rugby player. Loras did not fire a second shot. He was a professional. He knew how to calculate probabilities. His vision was obscured. The target was rushing towards him with lethal momentum. The Walther PPK was useless in close combat against an opponent with an arm span 30 centimeters longer than his. Loras turned his head. He used the butt of the gun to smash the glass door behind the office. The glass shattered into pieces. He jumped through the window frame with surprising agility for someone with white hair. Reacher burst into the office, 2 seconds too late. He saw Loras's back disappear around the corner of the adjacent warehouse. Reacher did not pursue. Tactical principle: do not chase the enemy into unfamiliar terrain that he has prepared, especially when that enemy has a gun and Reacher does not. He turned to Arthur Zane. Zane was trying to crawl under the desk. He was shaking so violently that Reacher could hear his teeth chattering. Reacher grabbed Zane by the collar of his silk shirt. He lifted him up as if he were a wet cat. He threw Zane into the leather swivel chair. The chair slid back, crashing hard into the filing cabinet. "Don't kill me," Zane screamed, covering his face with both hands. "I don't know anything. He forced me." Reacher said nothing. He stepped closer to the desk. The Walther had disappeared along with Loras, but there were still white cotton fragments scattered on the table. Reacher picked one up. He brought it close to his eyes, coarse, unwoven, the same type as Otto's description of what was found under the victim's nails. Physical evidence. The link had been established. "His name is Loras," Reacher said. It was a statement, not a question. Zane nodded vigorously, sweat streaming down his forehead, washing away his light makeup. "Joseph Loras. He is an old friend." An old friend pointing a gun at each other. "He's gone crazy," Zane stammered. "He said he wanted to help me. He said Steffi was an obstacle." Reacher stared at Zane. He analyzed the body language. Dilated pupils. Rapid breathing. The temporal artery pulsing strongly. He was terrified, but he was partly lying. "How did your wife die?" Reacher asked. "I don't know. She left 2 weeks ago," Reacher said. "Her body has been in the water for 2 weeks. You reported her missing 2 days ago. She often left." Zane tried to justify, his eyes darting around. "I thought she went shopping in the city." Reacher stepped closer. He leaned down face to face with Zane. The expensive cologne of Zane could not mask the sour smell of fear emanating from his pores. "You lied terribly, Arthur," Reacher said. He looked down at Zane's right arm. The shirt sleeve had been pushed up when Reacher grabbed him. A part of his pale forearm was exposed. There was a large scar. Reacher grabbed Zane's wrist and pulled hard. Zane yelped. Reacher rolled his sleeve up higher. The scar was star-shaped, the skin wrinkled, uneven. A healed old wound that left a permanent mark. "What is this?" Reacher asked. "An accident," Zane groaned. "I fell off my bike when I was little." "Wrong," Reacher said. "This is a wound from a hot metal fragment, high speed, a shell fragment or grenade. It tore through soft tissue and burned the surrounding skin." Reacher let go of Zane's hand. He fell back into the chair, rubbing his aching arm. "You have never been in the military," Reacher said. "Your record is completely clean. So where did you get this?" Zane was silent. He hung his head. Outside, the sound of a police siren could be heard. The sound echoed off the limestone cliffs, growing louder. Lohman and Burns were coming. The gunfire, even with a suppressor, was enough to draw attention in this quiet area, or Loras had triggered a silent alarm when he fled. Reacher mentally checked the time. 10:15. The police would arrive in 2 minutes. He could not be caught here. The scene was full of evidence of a struggle. The door was broken. Glass was shattered. Reacher would be the prime suspect for assault and illegal entry. He would be thrown into the county jail, and the investigation would end before it truly began. "Tell me where Loras is," Reacher ordered. "I don't know," Zane whispered. "He doesn't have a home. He lives in hiding." "He has a home," Reacher said. "Someone like him always needs a den." Zane hesitated for a second. "Rosenbusch Weg, number 6. But don't go there. He has traps." "Rosenbusch Weg," Reacher repeated. He turned and quickly walked out of the office. He did not take the main route. He went back through the rat-infested hallway. He exited the warehouse through the broken side door. He sprinted across the yard, hiding behind a row of dilapidated containers as the first patrol car turned into the main gate, its lights spinning. Reacher crawled through a gap in the western fence leading to the sparse woods. He disappeared into the dense oak canopy just as the screech of brakes sounded in the front yard. Reacher walked 2 miles through the woods to get back to town. He needed a more detailed map. Rosenbusch Weg. Rosebush Way. The name sounded romantic, but in this damn town, romance often concealed decay. 11:30. Reacher was hungry. He stopped at a small roadside grocery store. He bought 2 dark chocolate bars, a bottle of mineral water, and a local travel map. He stood eating right in front of the store, unwrapping the foil, taking a big bite. The chocolate was bitter and sweet. Instant energy. He opened the map. Rosenbusch Way is located on the northern edge of town, in a secluded area near the old cemetery. A perfect spot for someone wanting to hide few neighbors, clear sightlines to observe strangers, and plenty of escape routes. Reacher folded the map. He needed a vehicle. Walking there would take 45 minutes. Too long. An old Ford F-150 pickup truck pulled up in front of him. The window rolled down. It was Helen Craig. She looked at him, then down at the pair of shoes caked in the distinctive red mud of the industrial area. "You look like you just crawled out of a sewer," she remarked. "Pretty much," Reacher said. "I just had an interesting conversation with Zane's rats. Get in?" Helen nodded toward the passenger seat. "Lohman is searching everywhere for a giant drifter who wrecked his cousin's warehouse." Reacher opened the door and climbed into the truck. The old spring seat creaked under his weight. The inside smelled strongly of disinfectant and dog fur. "Where are you headed?" Reacher asked. "Going to check on a horse with a stomach ache at the northern farm," Helen said, shifting gears and pressing the gas. "But I guess you want to go somewhere else." "Rosenbusch Way," Reacher said. Helen's steering wheel hesitated slightly. She glanced at him. "That's the haunted neighborhood. No one lives there. Just a few rotting wooden houses from World War II." Zane said, "Loras is there." Loras. Helen frowned. "Joseph Loras, the old German guy. You know him. He came to my clinic once," Helen said, her eyes fixed straight ahead on the road. 2 years ago, he had a deep cut on his calf. He didn't want anesthesia. He sat still while I stitched him up with 6 stitches. Not a flinch. The kind of person who handles pain well," Reacher said. "More than that," Helen said, her voice dropping. "When I finished stitching, he looked at me and said, 'Pain is an illusion of the mind. Only death is real.'" His gaze. His gaze was like an empty tomb. Reacher said nothing. He looked out the window. The withered cornfields rushed by. "Who is he?" Helen asked. "He is the one who killed Steffi Zane," Reacher said. "And he is waiting for me." "What are you going to do, catch him?" "No," Reacher said. He checked the flexibility of his finger joints. "I intend to finish this." The pickup truck turned onto a bumpy dirt road. A dilapidated sign pointed Rosenbush Way. "Stop here," Reacher said when they were about half a mile from the house at the end of the road. "I will walk." Helen hit the brakes. The truck stopped in a cloud of dust. "Reacher," she called as he opened the door. He turned back. "Does he have a gun?" "Yes." "Do you have a gun?" "No." Helen reached down under the seat. She pulled out a short-barreled Smith & Wesson Model 10 revolver. Old, the wooden grip worn but well-maintained. "It's my father's," she said, handing it to him. 6 rounds of .38 Special. "Don't make me regret this." Reacher took the gun. Heavy, cold, well-balanced, he flipped the cylinder open to check. 6 lead bullets snugly fit in the chamber. He closed the cylinder with a neat click. "Thank you," Reacher said. "Stay in the car. If I don't come back in an hour, drive away and forget you ever met me." He stepped out of the car, walking towards the wooden house hidden behind the dark black pine trees. The clock in his head marked 12 noon. The sun was high. Reacher's shadow shrank beneath him, dark and sharp. The hunt began. Part 5, house number 6, on Rosenbush Way, was engulfed in a dense garden of weeds. Wild rose bushes stretched their thorny branches like dry claws scraping against the rotting wooden walls of the house. Reacher stopped at the edge of the woods, 50 meters from the house. He stood still in the shade of an old oak, blending into the gray trunk. He observed the one-story Victorian house paint peeling to reveal the gray wood beneath. The porch sagged. The windows were tightly shut, thick curtains drawn. No cars in the yard, no movement. Just the absolute silence of a forgotten place. Zane had said, "He has traps." Reacher did not dismiss the warning of a coward. Cowards often exaggerate their fears, but sometimes those fears are based on truth. Loras was a professional. A professional always protects his lair. Reacher moved. He did not follow the paved path leading to the front door. He circled to the left, wading through the grass that reached his knees. He stopped 3 meters from the house wall. His eyes scanned the ground. The weeds grew unevenly. There was a patch of grass flattened slightly, running across the side path. Reacher crouched down. He looked sideways. A fishing line as thin as a spider's thread was stretched across 2 feet off the ground. One end tied to the rose bush, the other disappearing under the floorboards. A simple trap, tripwire. If tripped, it would activate something. A grenade, a rigged handgun, or just a bell alarm. Reacher stepped over the line. His long legs helped him easily navigate the obstacle. He approached the side window. The window glass was coated in dust. The wooden frame was rotten. Reacher pulled out his pocket knife, wedging the blade between the frame and the sash, gently prying the latch. The rotting wood crumbled. The latch popped open silently. Reacher pushed the window up. He climbed inside. The stench hit his nose immediately, not the smell of dead mice like in the barn. This was the odor of a decaying human still alive. The smell of disinfectant, old bandages, and the sickly sweet scent of late-stage cancer. Reacher was standing in a small bedroom. The bed was bare. Only a yellowed mattress remained. On the bedside table were dozens of empty medicine bottles. Morphine, powerful painkillers. Reacher held the Smith & Wesson Model 10 inches his right hand. His thumb rested on the hammer. He moved out into the hallway. The wooden floor creaked softly under his feet. Reacher adjusted his weight, shifting pressure to the outer edge of his foot to minimize noise. The living room was at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar. Dim light spilled out. Reacher pressed against the wall. He listened, breathing, wheezing, intermittent, like air passing through a leaky pipe. He stepped into the room, gun aimed straight ahead. Joseph Loras was sitting in a tattered red velvet armchair, facing the entrance. He was waiting. "You're late," Loras said. His voice was dry, weak, but still retained a cold calmness. He wore the same old gray suit as this morning, but now it looked baggy on his gaunt frame. His face was ashen, skin stretched over bones. His eyes were sunken, yet his gaze remained sharp as a razor. On his thigh lay a Walther PPK. Reacher did not stop. He stepped to the left, breaking Loras's direct line of sight. "Put the gun down," Reacher said. Loras chuckled softly. The laugh turned into a fit of coughing. He coughed up blood into a handkerchief that he had crumpled in his left hand. "I'm not gonna shoot you," Reacher, Loras said, panting. "I don't have the strength to hit a moving target anymore." He dropped the gun to the floor. The sound of metal hitting wood was a dry thud. Reacher kept his gun aimed at Loras's chest. He kicked the Walther away towards the corner of the room. "Why did you kill her?" Reacher asked. Loras leaned his head back against the chair, closing his eyes. His breathing was labored. "She wanted to leave," Loras whispered. "Steffi, she was a good woman, too good for this world. And too good for Arthur." "Did Zane order you?" Arthur. Loras opened his eyes, sneering. "Arthur is a coward. He wouldn't dare order the killing of a fly. He only knows how to cry and beg. Loras, she's going to leave." "Loras, she knows about my shady business. Loras, help me." "And you helped him by drowning his wife?" "I am a soldier," Reacher, Loras said, his voice suddenly hardening. "I was trained to solve problems. When a leg is gangrenous, you have to amputate it to save the whole body. Steffi was Arthur's gangrenous leg." "She is not a leg," Reacher said coldly. "She is a human being. In war there are no human beings, only targets and obstacles," Reacher observed Loras. "He was dying, lung or stomach cancer, metastasis everywhere. He was only alive by will and morphine." "You are sick," Reacher said. "Cancer," Loras confirmed. "The doctor said, I have 3 months left. That was 6 months ago. I've lived past my time. I lived to clean up for Arthur one last time." "Clean up? Arthur can't go to prison. He's weak. He would die in there within a week. I owe his father a life. I promised to protect that foolish boy." Reacher understood the issue. A blind and distorted loyalty. A Ronin serving a useless lord. "What do you intend to do?" Reacher asked. A trophy, Loras laughed, revealing his yellowed teeth. "No, I will give Arthur one last gift, a sacrificial offering." Loras put his hand into the pocket of his vest. Reacher tensed his index finger, tightening on the trigger. "Take your hand out slowly." Loras withdrew his hand. It was not a gun. It was a small capsule, white in color. "You know what this is?" Reacher. Loras held the capsule up to the dim light. "Cyanide. The old type. Military grade from the war." "Don't do that," Reacher said. "You need to tell the truth to the police, to clear her name, to make Arthur pay." "The truth," Loras shook his head. "The truth is, I killed her. Just me. Arthur is innocent. He's just a grieving husband." "That's not justice," Reacher said. He took a step forward. "Justice is for the winners," Loras said, "and I always win." He brought the capsule to his mouth. Reacher lunged. 113 pounds, moving at explosive speed, but the distance was 3 meters. Loras bit down on the capsule. Reacher managed to grab Loras by the collar, yanking him forward, trying to make him choke. Too late. The bitter smell of almonds filled the air. Loras's body convulsed violently. His eyes rolled back, the whites showing wildly. He gasped for air, but his lungs had stopped working. The poison attacked his central nervous system like a jolt of electricity. "Reacher, let go." Loras collapsed to the floor, writhing. He jerked twice more and then lay still. The room fell into silence. Only the ticking of the old pendulum clock on the wall counted the meaningless passage of time. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Reacher stood watching the corpse. Loras was dead, taking with him a confession. Arthur Zane would be free. He would play the role of the grieving widower, inherit the fortune, and continue his wretched life. Reacher clenched his fists. The knuckles turned pale. He hated loose ends. He hated when the bad guy escaped punishment thanks to the sacrifice of another bad guy. The clock in Reacher's head struck 12:45. Outside, the sound of police sirens echoed again. This time, more of them. 3 cars. Maybe 4. Lohman had found this place, or someone had tipped him off. Reacher looked at the Smith & Wesson in his hand. Helen's gun. If the police found him here with this gun and a dead body, he would have no way to explain. He wiped the fingerprints off the gun with his shirt tail. He placed it on the table next to the pile of empty pill bottles. He needed to leave, but he couldn't let Zane win so easily. Reacher rummaged through Loras's vest pocket, a worn leather wallet, a black and white photo of 2 young soldiers, and a folded piece of paper. Reacher opened the paper. It was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky but careful. To the sheriff, Joseph Loras, confessed to having killed Steffi Zane. Loras had prepared a suicide note. He intended to turn his death into the perfect conclusion for the case, washing away any doubts about Zane. Reacher skimmed through. The letter detailed how he killed her out of jealousy, a perfect lie. Reacher pulled out a Zippo lighter from his jeans pocket. He ignited the paper. The flame licked the edge of the paper, turning a yellow-orange, then blackened into ash. Reacher let it drop into the ashtray on the table, watching it burn completely. No more suicide note, no more easy confession. Now Loras's death was just the death of a suspect. The police would still need answers, and most importantly, Arthur Zane would lose his shield. He would panic, and when he panicked, he would make mistakes. Reacher heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside. The car door slammed shut. The loudspeaker blared. "This is Sheriff Lohman. Those inside, come out with your hands raised." Reacher looked around. The front door was blocked. The back door was surely surrounded as well. He looked up at the ceiling. There was a hatch leading to the attic. Reacher pulled the armchair closer, stepped up, and pushed open the hatch. He hoisted himself up, disappearing into the darkness of the dusty attic, just as the sound of the door being broken down echoed below. Reacher lay still on the beam, listening to the heavy footsteps flooding into the living room. "He's dead," Burns's voice rang out. "Looks like he was poisoned." "Search around," Lohman barked. "Find the giant. He can't have gone far." Reacher remained still, slowing his heartbeat to 60 beats per minute. He waited. He was not the prey. He was the hunter, patiently waiting for the right moment. Reacher pressed himself against the oak beam. A thin layer of plastered dust coated the shoulders of his coat. Below, heavy footsteps moved back and forth in the living room, the sound of furniture being shifted. The rustle of papers. "No one is here, sir," Burns's voice echoed up, distorted through the thin ceiling. "Just the body." "He can't just vanish," Lohman's voice growled. The back door was unlocked from the outside. The side window was pried open. "Someone got in here before us." The footsteps approached the table where Reacher had left the gun. Lohman said, "Smith & Wesson, 38, fully loaded, clean, no fingerprints." Reacher lay still, heartbeat at 50 beats per minute. He had cleaned the gun, but the serial number remained. If Lohman checked the gun registration records, Helen would be in trouble. Reacher needed to deal with Zane before the police bureaucracy could kick in. "What's this?" Lohman asked. Silence for 3 seconds. Lohman said. "In the ashtray. Still warm." Reacher squinted in the darkness. Lohman was better than he thought. "Someone burned a piece of paper just before we arrived," Lohman concluded. "It could be a suicide note. Or evidence." Why burn a suicide note, Burns wondered. To silence the dead, or to unsettle the living? Lohman said. "Search more thoroughly. Check the basement. Look around the house." The footsteps scattered. Reacher looked up at the roof. The old shingles had small gaps, letting in beams of light. There were no skylights. He had to create his own exit. Reacher chose a spot near the chimney where the roof structure was usually weakest due to long-term water damage. He bent his left leg, bracing his back against the beam for leverage. He kicked hard. Not a explosive kick, but a gradually increasing force, compact and decisive. The rotting board cracked sharply and broke away. The midday light flooded in, dazzling and dusty. Below, the noise stopped. "What was that?" Burns shouted. "In the attic." "Get up there now," Lohman ordered. Reacher didn't wait. He crawled through the opening he had just created, pulling himself onto the roof. The asphalt shingles were scorching under the midday sun. Reacher slipped a bit, but regained his balance. He was 4 meters above the ground. In front of the house, 3 police cars blocked the exit. An officer stood guard by the gate, holding a rifle. Reacher moved to the other side of the roof out of the guard's line of sight. He looked down. A wild, overgrown lawn. Thorny rose bushes grew close to the house wall. He heard the hatch door opening inside the house. A flashlight beam swept back and forth. Reacher jumped. He let himself fall freely. Gravity pulled 113 pounds down with an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. He landed on his toes, immediately rolling to the right to dissipate the impact, tumbling through the tall grass. His shoulder slammed into the hard ground. It hurt, but no broken bones. Reacher sprang up immediately. He dashed into the thick bushes surrounding the area, the sharp thorns of the rosebush tearing at his tarp jacket and scratching his cheek. "He's on the roof," Burns shouted from the hole in the ceiling. Gunfire erupted. Bang! A bullet fired wildly into the sky. Burns was panicking. Reacher didn't look back. He zigzagged through the pine forest, using the large trunks as shields. He moved quickly and silently like a large predator. 3 minutes later, Reacher reached the dirt road where Helen was parked. The Ford F-150 roared to life, the engine rumbling. Helen sat behind the wheel, her face pale, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The passenger door swung open. Reacher jumped into the vehicle. "Go," he said. Helen flinched, nearly screaming. She saw the bloodied scratch on his cheek and the dust of plaster covering his hair. "The gunshots," she stammered. "Did they shoot you?" "They shot into the air," Reacher said, closing the car door. "Drive, normal speed, not fast, not slow." Helen swallowed hard, releasing the handbrake. The vehicle rolled away, leaving Rosenbusch Weg. "How's Loras?" Helen asked as they reached the paved road. "Dead," Reacher said. "Suicide, potassium cyanide." Helen tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "So it's over," he confessed. "He intended to," Reacher said, his eyes scanning the road behind through the rearview mirror. "He left a letter taking full responsibility, protecting Arthur Zane, and I burned it." Helen turned to look at him, her eyes wide with shock. "You burned the evidence exonerating Zane. Why? Because Zane is not innocent," Reacher said. "Loras was just a tool. Zane is the mastermind. If there's a confession letter, the police will close the case. Zane will be free. He'll drink champagne tonight to celebrate his wife's death. But now the police don't know who killed Steffi. They know Loras is dead. They found your gun at the scene." "My gun," Helen gasped. "I wiped the fingerprints clean." "But you need to get home right away. Call the police. Report that the gun was stolen last night, from the car or at the clinic. File a false report. That's the only way to keep you out of it. Do it now." Helen nodded, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her phone. "What about Zane?" she asked. "Take me to his house," Reacher said. "For what? The police will be there." "No," Reacher shook his head. "The police are at Loras's house, busy with the body and my traces. Zane is home alone. He's waiting for a call from Loman. He's waiting for the good news that Loras is dead and has taken all the secrets to the grave. And when he finds out there's no suicide note, he'll panic," Reacher finished the thought. "He'll think Loras betrayed him, or that Loras hid evidence somewhere else." Reacher glanced at the clock in his mind. 1 hour and 15 minutes past noon. "Drop me at the end of Grafton Street," Reacher said. "Then you disappear. Don't come back here." "Are you going to kill him?" Helen asked, her voice trembling. Reacher did not answer. He looked out the window. The peaceful suburban houses passed by, the neatly trimmed lawns, the white fences, the world of people like Arthur Zane. Reacher did not believe in the law in places like this. The law here was written by money and connections. He believed in the law of the jungle. 15 minutes later, Reacher got out of the car at the intersection of Grafton Street. He stood watching Helen's Ford disappear. He walked along the tiled sidewalk. The neighborhood was deserted. The wealthy were in their air-conditioned offices or golf clubs. Number 10. A 2-story colonial-style villa. White columns, large French windows, a vast lawn in front. A black Mercedes was parked in the driveway. Zane was home. Reacher did not go through the front gate. He circled around to the back, jumping over the 2-meter-high wooden fence surrounding the backyard. A kidney-shaped pool with crystal-clear water. an expensive outdoor furniture set, sliding glass doors leading into the living room. Reacher tried the door. Locked. He looked around. A decorative stone in a flower pot. He picked it up, wrapping it in the hem of his coat. Bang. Glass shattered. Reacher reached in, unlocking the latch. He stepped inside the house. The air inside was cool. The air conditioner was running at full power. The marble floor was polished to a shine. "Is someone there?" Zane's voice echoed from upstairs, trembling, wary. Reacher did not answer. He walked up the thick, carpeted stairs, his footsteps completely swallowed. Zane was in the master bedroom. He was stuffing clothes into an open Louis Vuitton suitcase on the bed. A passport and a stack of cash were carelessly tossed beside it. He was preparing to flee. The instincts of a rat told him that the ship was sinking. Reacher stood at the door of the room. Zane turned around. He saw Reacher, his face drained of color. He backed away, hitting the bed frame, nearly falling. "You," Zane stammered. "I thought the police had caught you." "The police are busy," Reacher said. He stepped into the room. The space was spacious, luxurious, filled with useless, expensive items. "What do you want?" "Money." Zane grabbed the stack of cash from the bed, offering it. "Take it, $50,000. Take it and go." Reacher swatted his hand away. The stack of cash scattered, falling to the floor like autumn leaves. "Loras is dead," Reacher said. Zane swallowed hard. A glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. Did he say anything he was going to say? Reacher lied. "He wrote a letter. It tells everything. About you forcing him to kill Steffi. About you blackmailing him with old favors." "No way," Zane shouted. "He is loyal to me. I am the son of his benefactor. Loyalty has its limits, Arthur. When the poison seeps into the gut, people often want peace." "Where's the letter?" Zane asked, his eyes darting wildly. "Does the police have it?" "I have it," Reacher said. Zane froze. He looked at Reacher, calculating. "How much do you want?" Zane asked again. "I can pay more. I have an account in the Caymans. I have diamonds in the safe." Reacher stepped closer. He invaded Zane's space, forcing him back against the wall. "I don't want your money," Reacher said. "I want to know why. Why? What? Why kill her? If she wants to leave, let her go. Why kill?" Zane laughed, a bitter, insane laugh. He slid down, sitting on the floor. "Let her go," Zane hissed. "She was going to take half of my assets. Her lawyer had drafted the papers. I would lose the company. I would lose this house. I would become nothing, just for money. Money is everything," Zane screamed. "You are a broke loser, you don't understand. Without money, I am nothing. I can't go back to a miserable life. I would rather die." "You won't die," Reacher said coldly. "You let your wife die, and you let your friend die in your place. They are tools." Zane shut up, his face red. "Loras is a useless old dog. Steffi is an ungrateful whore. I am the only one that matters." He lunged toward the nightstand. He opened the drawer. Reacher saw the gun before Zane could touch it. A compact silver Beretta. Reacher was not quick. He didn't need to be quick. He just needed to be precise. He took a step forward, kicking hard at Zane's arm, reaching into the drawer. Crack! The sound of the forearm breaking was crisp. Zane screamed in pain, collapsing to the floor, clutching his dangling broken arm. The Beretta remained still in the drawer. Reacher bent down, picked up the gun. He removed the magazine and tossed it out the window. He threw the gun body under the bed. "You broke your arm," Arthur Reacher said, "just like the way you got hurt in your imaginary war." Zane writhed on the floor, tears and snot streaming down. "Call an ambulance, please." Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 1 hour and 35 minutes. Outside, the sound of police sirens echoed again. This time they stopped right in front of Zane's house. Loman has arrived. Perhaps he has found the traces of Reacher's intrusion, or he simply came to inform Zane. Reacher looked at Zane one last time. "The police are here," Reacher said. "You have two choices. One is to tell the truth and go to jail. The other is to try to bribe Loman and live the rest of your life in fear that I will come back." Zane looked up at Reacher, his eyes filled with horror. Who are you?" "No one," Reacher said. He turned around and stepped out onto the second-floor balcony. He looked down. The grass was soft. The height was 4 meters. Easy. Reacher jumped down, disappearing into the backyard just as the doorbell rang loudly. The mission was not over, but the hardest part was done. Now was the time to sow the final chaos. Reacher did not run far. He stopped at the edge of the forest where the old oak trees met the wooden fence behind Zane's house. He stood still, leaning against a rough tree trunk, blending into the dappled shadows. His breathing was steady. His pulse was 58 beats per minute, he observed. 2 patrol cars and an ambulance were haphazardly parked on the gravel driveway. The red and blue lights spun wildly, casting a surreal hue over the meticulously trimmed garden. 2 paramedics were pushing a stretcher out. Arthur Zane lay on it, his right arm splinted against his chest, an oxygen mask covering half his face. He no longer bore the arrogance of a successful businessman. He looked like a pile of discarded old clothes. Sheriff Lohman followed behind the stretcher. He held a plastic evidence bag in his hand. Inside was the silver Beretta that Reacher had thrown under the bed. Lohman stopped in front of the ambulance, looking around. He gazed toward the forest. Reacher knew Lohman could not see him. Reacher stood backlit, motionless, camouflaged by the gray-green of the old forest, but Lohman sensed him. The instinct of an old hunting dog was catching the scent of the wolf. The ambulance doors closed. The siren blared, tearing through the artificial silence of the wealthy neighborhood. Zane had been arrested for illegal possession of a weapon, for assault, or had Lohman discovered the connection? Not enough. Reacher knew the legal system. A good lawyer would argue that Zane was a victim of a home invasion and the gun was for self-defense. Loras's death would be seen as the act of a lone madman. Reacher needed to drive the final nail into Zane's coffin. He turned his back and walked deeper into the forest. He headed toward town. 3:15 p.m. Reacher entered the diner for the 3rd time that day. The place was empty. It was the slow hour between lunch and dinner. Betty was sitting at a corner table tallying the accounts. She looked up and saw Reacher. She did not smile, but she did not chase him away either. "Still here?" she asked. "About to leave," Reacher said. He sat down on the familiar stool. "Coffee. To go." Betty poured black coffee into a large foam cup, sealing it with a plastic lid. The door opened. The wind chimes jingled. A cold gust rushed in. Captain Lohman walked in. He took off his hat and placed it on the counter. His balding head was dotted with sweat despite the cold weather. He looked 10 years older than he did last night. Lohman sat down on the stool next to Reacher, 2 stools away, a safe distance. "I knew you were here," Lohman said, not looking at Reacher. "People like you always return to the scene, or to where there's coffee." Reacher said nothing. He twisted the foam cup in his hands. "Arthur Zane has a fractured ulna and radius," Lohman said. "A double-kick fracture. The doctor said the force of the kick was equivalent to a motorcycle accident." "That's unfortunate," Reacher said. "Loras died at home. Cyanide poisoning." In the ashtray there were remnants of a burned piece of paper. Lohman continued, his voice flat as if reading a report. "And Helen Cragg just reported a missing handgun. The gun I found on Loras's table." Lohman turned to look directly at Reacher. His eyes were tired but sharp. "I could arrest you right now, Reacher. Breaking and entering, assault, tampering with evidence, possession of an illegal weapon." "You could," Reacher agreed, "but you won't." "Why not?" "Because you hate unsolved cases, and you hate Zane." Lohman was silent for a moment. He signaled for Betty to pour coffee. "Zane isn't pleading guilty," Lohman said after taking a sip. "He's crying and screaming that he's being blackmailed. He says Loras killed his wife out of jealousy. He has an alibi." Neighbors heard the couple arguing loudly the night she went missing, 2 days ago. Reacher nodded. This was the final piece of the puzzle. "Her body was in the water for 2 weeks, Reacher said. "You know that. The coroner knows that. The lawyer will argue that the water temperature skews the time of death. If there are witnesses who heard the argument 2 days ago, the case will hit a dead end." "The dead don't argue," Reacher said. "Exactly." "So where did the argument come from?" Reacher recalled. "Zane's shed, the glass office, the modern equipment." "Check Zane's house," Reacher said. Not the safe, not the computer. Check the stereo system. Or a high-quality tape recorder. A tape recorder. He's a coward, but he's meticulous, Reacher explained. He killed his wife 2 weeks ago. He needed an excuse to explain her absence. He waited until he was ready to report it, then he played a tape recording of an old argument. He opened the window, turned up the volume so the neighbors could hear. Then he called the police. Lohman's eyes lit up, a glimmer of understanding. He's acting with a ghost, Lohman murmured. Find that tape, Reacher said, or check the playback history on the digital devices. That's hard evidence. It will break his alibi. When the alibi collapses, Loras will become an accomplice, not the sole perpetrator. Lohman nodded slowly. He drained his coffee cup. What did you burn at Loras's house? Lohman asked. Trash, Reacher said. Lohman put his hat on. He stood up, adjusting his gun belt. The Greyhound bus to Atlanta will be here in 10 minutes, Lohman said, looking at his watch. It stops across the street. Don't miss it. I never miss a ride, Reacher said. Lohman stepped out the door. He paused, holding the door open. Reacher, he called. Reacher turned his head back. Don't go back to Griffin's Ridge. That's not a tourist destination, Reacher replied. The door closed. Reacher finished his last sip of coffee. He stood up, placing a $5 bill on the counter. Goodbye, Betty. Goodbye, Stranger Betty said, her voice tinged with a bit of regret. Reacher stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The dark clouds were gradually clearing, revealing a faint pale blue sky to the west. The wind was still cold, but the air was cleaner. The large silver Greyhound bus was slowly rolling into the station, the familiar sound of the air brakes hissing. Reacher looked across the street. A Ford F-150 was parked at the corner. The window was rolled down halfway. Helen Cragg sat behind the wheel. She wore sunglasses. She looked at him and gave a slight nod, a nod of complicity and respect. Reacher did not wave. He simply raised his thumb gently. He boarded the bus. Where to? The driver asked a large black man with a bright white smile. As far as I can go for $20, Reacher said, handing over the crisp bill. Macon, the driver said, tearing the ticket. Reacher took the ticket and walked to the back of the bus. He chose the long seat at the very back next to the window. The bus shuddered into motion. Red brick houses, church steeples, and the Griffin's Ridge sign receded behind him. Reacher leaned his head against the cool glass. He closed his eyes. Zane would go to prison. Helen would be safe. Lohman would either get promoted or retire with honor. The world had balanced out a little. The clock in Reacher's head read 4 p.m. He fell asleep. Part 8. The Greyhound traveled south on Highway 19. The speed was steady at 65 miles per hour. The sound of the tires rumbling on the wet asphalt created a monotonous white noise, lulling him to sleep. But Reacher did not sleep. He sat in the last row on the right next to the window, a strategic position. He could observe the entire length of the bus and the reflection in the outside rear-view mirror. The clock in his head signaled 6:15 p.m. The sunset had completely faded. Outside the window was the pitch-black night of rural Georgia, occasionally interrupted by the headlights of oncoming cars. Reacher was calculating. Arthur Zane was a coward. A coward does not typically build an empire on his own. He needed backing. He needed capital. And most importantly, he needed customers for Zane Biological Supplies, thousands of white mice. Reacher recalled the scale of the warehouse. It was not the scale of a local business supplying a high school. It was industrial scale. Zane had said, I'm going to lose the company. I'm going to be nothing. He was afraid of losing money. But what was he more afraid of? Reacher remembered Zane's expression when he mentioned partner, not Loras. Loras was just a henchman. There was another force, a force that had invested in that filthy warehouse. Reacher looked into the outside rearview mirror through the glass of the window. A pair of blue-white xenon headlights were tailing the bus. They had been there since the bus left Griffin's Ridge, maintaining a distance of 200 meters, not overtaking, not falling behind. Reacher turned, pretending to stretch his legs, his eyes glancing through the bus's rear window. A black sedan. It could be a Lincoln Town Car or a Cadillac, a newer model, smooth suspension. Not police. Police use Ford or Dodge, and they wouldn't tail this obviously on the highway if they wanted to make an arrest. They would block the front. The tailgater wanted to wait for the bus to stop. Reacher knew the Greyhound procedure. This trip would stop at the Dixie Stop rest area in 45 minutes for the driver to have dinner and passengers to use the restroom. That would be the point of impact. Reacher leaned his head back against the seat, closed his eyes. He adjusted his breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. He needed to rest. He needed to store energy for the 30 minutes of violence to come. 7 o'clock sharp. The bus slowed down, the right turn signal blinking. It turned into a vast rest area standing alone amidst the harvested cotton fields. The Dixie Stop sign glowed with bright red neon 1S burned out. There was a convenience store, a fast food restaurant, and a row of gas pumps for long-haul trucks. 30-minute break, the driver announced over the intercom, his voice tired. The door opened. Passengers shuffled down. The elderly needed to use the restroom. Young mothers needed hot water for formula. The men needed to smoke. Reacher was the last to step down. He stood at the bus doorstep scanning the area. The parking lot was wide, gravel-covered. 10 18-wheel trucks were parked in a row, their engines idling softly. The area for cars was quieter. The black sedan glided into the parking lot, parking in the darkest area 50 meters from the restaurant. Reacher stepped onto the ground. He stretched. The cold night wind blew through his thin coat. But Reacher did not shiver. He liked the cold. It sharpened the senses. He walked towards the convenience store. He walked slowly, with long, steady strides. He exposed his back to the opponent for observation. Bait. He entered the store. The fluorescent lights blared. The smell of cheap coffee and overcooked sausages filled the air. Reacher headed straight to the restroom at the back. The men's restroom door swung open. Inside was empty. The walls were covered in dirty white tiles filled with graffiti. Reacher washed his face with cold water. He looked into the mirror. His pale blue eyes coldly stared back at him. He did not use the hand dryer. The noise would drown out the sound of footsteps. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Reacher stood tucked behind the entrance door in the shadowy corner of the hinge. 5 seconds later, the restroom door was pushed open forcefully. 2 men stepped inside. They were large, not as big as Reacher, but still fitting the profile of professional tough guys. Leather jackets, short hair, tiny communication devices in their ears. The lead man had a broken nose, his right hand stuffed in his jacket pocket. The man behind held a rolled-up newspaper, but the stiff way he held it suggested there was a metal or lead core inside. They scanned the empty room. "Where is he?" the man with the broken nose muttered. "I saw him come in here," said the man with the newspaper. Reacher stepped out from behind the door. He closed it and locked it. Click. The 2 men jumped and turned around. The space in the restroom was about 10 square meters. Cramped. Good for Reacher, bad for them. "Are you looking for me?" Reacher asked. His voice calm, as if he were asking for directions. The man with a broken nose pulled his hand out of his pocket. A 15-centimeter switchblade snapped open with a click. "Jack Reacher," he said, "you've caused a lot of damage to the business." "I thought Arthur Zane was arrested," Reacher said. "Arthur is just the manager." The man with the broken nose scoffed, stepping forward. "The boss doesn't like you messing up the warehouse, and the boss wants an apology." "I'm not good at apologies," Reacher said. "I'm only good at calculations." "Calculating what?" "Calculating how much force your jaw can withstand in newtons." The man with the broken nose roared and lunged forward. The thrust aimed straight at Reacher's lower abdomen. A basic but deadly move. Reacher did not back away. He pivoted his hips to the left at a 45-degree angle. The blade slid past his coat, slicing through the fabric but not touching his skin. At the same time, Reacher threw a right punch, not to the face, to the wrist holding the knife. The impact of his fist, as big as a rock, against the fragile wrist joint created a crisp sound. The man with the broken nose screamed, the knife clattering to the tiled floor. Reacher grabbed the man's hair, yanking his head down. He raised his right knee. The face met the knee. The physics of collision. The man with the broken nose collapsed like an empty bag of cement, blood gushing from his nostrils. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The other man, the one holding the newspaper, was stunned for a tenth of a second. That was a fatal mistake. He swung the newspaper up. Inside was a construction steel bar. Reacher stepped over the man with the broken nose. He infiltrated the opponent's safe zone. The man with the newspaper swung his arm. Too wide, too slow. Reacher used his left palm to push hard against the man's chin, snapping his head back. At the same time, his right hand delivered a hook to the liver area. The man with the newspaper opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The pain from the liver shock paralyzed his body. Reacher added an elbow strike to the temple. The man fell, hitting his head against the urinal, sliding down to the floor, lying in a puddle of stagnant water. 15 seconds. The clock in Reacher's head registered 7:12. He bent down, picked up the newspaper. Inside was an 18mm steel bar 40 centimeters long. He tossed it into the trash bin. He picked up the folding knife, closed it, and put it in his pocket. A trophy. Reacher searched the man with the broken nose, a wallet, a fake ID card, an old flip phone for one-time use. Reacher opened the phone. There was only one number in the contacts office. He pressed the call button. The phone rang twice. "Is the job done?" A voice came from the other end, a male voice, deep, polite, but cold. Not a southern accent, a city voice, Chicago or New York. "Not yet," Reacher said. Silence stretched for 5 seconds. "Who is this?" the voice asked, unflustered. "The person you just sent 2 clowns to meet," Reacher said. "They're sleeping in the restroom at Dixie Stop. You should send an ambulance. The man with the broken nose needs orthopedic surgery." "You're making a big mistake, buddy," the voice turned sharp. "You have no idea what you're getting into." "I know Arthur Zane supplies rats for medical experiments," Reacher said. "And I know you're not just interested in the rats. You're interested in something inside the rats. You're smarter than you look." "And I'm also more dangerous than I look," Reacher said. "Don't follow me anymore. If I see another car tailing me, I won't just knock out the driver. I'll come back for you. And I won't knock. You won't find me. I'm military police," Reacher said. "I find everyone." He hung up, broke the phone in half, tossed it into the toilet. Flushed, Reacher adjusted his coat. He looked at the 2 men lying motionless on the floor. He stepped out of the restroom. No one noticed. Everyone was busy buying coffee and donuts. Reacher walked out to the parking lot. The black sedan was still parked there, the engine turned off. He pulled out the pocket knife he had just confiscated. He walked around the car. Slash, 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 slash. All 4 tires were slashed. Reacher folded the knife back and tucked it into his pocket. He boarded the Greyhound bus just as the driver started the engine. "Right on time," the driver said. Reacher nodded and made his way to his seat. The bus rolled away, leaving the rest stop and merging into the flow of traffic on the highway. Reacher looked back. The black sedan lay deflated on the gravel, motionless and harmless, but Reacher knew this was not over. The call just confirmed that. The office, an organization, Arthur Zane, was just a small link that had been removed. Reacher did not like being threatened, and he particularly hated those who thought they could control the lives of others from a distance over the phone. He visualized the map in his head, next destination Macon, but from Macon he could go anywhere. Chicago, New York, where the voice on the other end was. Reacher closed his eyes. That was a matter for tomorrow. Right now he needed to sleep. Part 9. The bus arrived in Macon, Georgia at 10:45 p.m. The Greyhound station in Macon was an ugly concrete block nestled among abandoned warehouses and railroad tracks. The sickly yellow light from the tall street lamps illuminated the oil-stained asphalt. Reacher stepped off the bus. He had no luggage to collect. He simply adjusted his canvas jacket collar, inhaling a breath of damp air mixed with the smell of diesel smoke and fried chicken from the fast food joint across the street. He scanned the pickup area. A few beat-up taxis. A local police patrol car parked lazily in a hidden corner. the officer inside dozing off. A few homeless people were rummaging through the trash cans. No black sedan, no guys in suits with earpieces. The tire-slashing tactic at Dixie Stop had worked. Reacher had bought himself some time, about 2 hours depending on how fast the enemy could change tires or call for backup. Reacher walked out of the station. He did not want to stay in a place with security cameras and controlled exits. He turned onto Broadway Avenue. The streets were deserted. The shops were closed and silent. His internal clock read 11 p.m. Reacher needed 3 things: food, a place to sleep, and information. He found a Waffle House open 24/7, 4 blocks from the station. The bright yellow sign was dazzling and inviting. Reacher walked in. He chose a table in the corner, his back against the wall, facing the main door and the large glass window. "What will you have, big guy?" an older black waitress asked, holding a coffee pot. "Coffee," Reacher said, "and the all-star special. Fried eggs, bacon, a sandwich, and hash browns." The waitress poured the coffee. Black, hot. Reacher took a sip. A feeling of alertness spread through his veins. He pulled out the leather wallet he had taken from the broken-nosed guy at Dixie Stop. He opened it right on the table, shielding it with his massive frame. Cash. Reacher counted quickly. $820. Bills of 20 and 50. Old and soft. No consecutive serial numbers. Good. This was his war chest. Identification. A Georgia driver's license. Name Richard Kane. Address in Atlanta. A photo of the broken-nosed guy looking younger and less battered than when Reacher left him on the bathroom floor. Credit card. Reacher didn't care. Using a credit card left an electronic trail, he rummaged through the innermost compartment of the wallet. A parking ticket. Light blue. Thermal print. The ink had started to fade. Lenox Square parking lot. Buckhead, Atlanta, October 14th. Entry time, 9 a.m. Reacher flipped the ticket over. There was a hurriedly written number in blue ballpoint pen. Unit 404. ZBS. Reacher stared at those 3 letters. ZBS. Zane Biological Supplies. The connection was established. This assassin came from Atlanta. He had been to some location related to Zane's company in the upscale Buckhead area. And Unit 404 could be a safe apartment or a satellite office. Reacher memorized the number and address. He tore the parking ticket into small pieces and dropped it into the ashtray on the table. He finished the meal in 8 minutes. Energy replenished. He left $20 on the table. Reacher left the diner. 11:30 a.m. He didn't take the bus to Atlanta right away. That was what they expected. The office knew he was on this route. They would be watching the Atlanta bus station. Reacher needed to change his mode of transportation. He walked to a pawn shop and thrift store at the end of the street where the neon lights still flickered with the words, "Buy gold." The door was locked. Reacher knocked hard on the bulletproof glass. A scruffy man stepped out holding a baseball bat. He looked at Reacher, sizing him up, then cracked the door open through the security chain. "We're closed," the guy said. "I need to buy clothes," Reacher said, holding up a $100 bill, "and I don't need a receipt." The shop owner looked at the bill. He unlatched the chain. Reacher stepped inside. The smell of dust and old metal. 10 minutes later, Reacher walked out. He had changed into a new outfit. Now he wore loose beige khakis, a blue and black plaid flannel shirt, and a faded denim jacket. He looked more like a freelance construction worker than a military drifter. He tossed the old clothes into a trash bin 2 blocks away. He walked out to the I-75 highway. Reacher stood at the on-ramp. He raised his thumb, the classic hitchhiking technique. He stood under the sickly yellow streetlight, a harmless giant looking for a way home. 15 minutes passed. 3 trucks drove by, kicking up dust. The 4th truck slowed down. An 18-wheeler Peterbilt carrying frozen goods. The sound of the air brakes screeched. The passenger door opened. "Where to?" the driver asked a skinny man wearing a baseball cap. "North," Reacher said. "Atlanta." "Hop in," the driver said. "I need someone to talk to so I don't doze off." Reacher climbed into the high cabin. The smell of stale cigarettes and coffee. He shut the door. The truck shuddered, rolled away, merging into the highway lane. "My name's Dell," the driver said. "Reacher." What do you do, Reacher? I solve problems, Reacher replied. Sounds busy, Dell chuckled. This world is always full of problems. Reacher looked out the window. The white lines on the road whizzed by rapidly. Atlanta was 80 miles away, about 1 hour and 15 minutes of driving at this speed. Reacher closed his eyes. He began to formulate a battle plan. Unit 404, Buckhead, a wealthy area, high security, cameras everywhere. He couldn't just barge in like at Zane's warehouse. He needed reconnaissance. He needed to identify who the boss was. Why would a company supplying mice in a backwater town have ties to the mob in Atlanta? And why were they so afraid of Steffi Zane that they had to kill her and then try to silence Reacher mice? Zane had talked about solutions for future medicine. Reacher recalled the scar on Zane's hand, a fabricated wound. But Zane had medication. Helen Craig said he often came asking for antibiotics, not for the mice. Reacher opened his eyes. A hypothesis formed in his mind. What if the mice weren't the product? What if the mice were just vessels? What do you think about the plague? Reacher asked Dell. Dell jumped, glancing over. The plague? You mean the flu or COVID? Worse things, Reacher said. Things people cultivate in laboratories. I think, Dell said, shivering. I think if that stuff gets out, we're done for. There's nowhere to hide. Reacher nodded. Right, nowhere to hide. That's why Steffi had to die. She knew something that could wipe out more than just a bank account. She knew about a mass death, and now Reacher was heading straight into the lair of those who created it. The clock in his head struck 1 a.m. The truck sped off into the night, heading towards the bright lights of Atlanta, shining against the northern sky. Reacher said nothing more. He let the silence envelop the cabin, heavy and threatening. Part 10 Reacher got out of the vehicle at the exit of the I-285 Beltway at 2:30 a.m. Dell waved goodbye and drove the bulky Peterbilt into the night, heading towards the warehouse in Florida. Reacher stood alone on the cold concrete. Atlanta appeared in the distance like a dazzling island of light floating on the black sea of southern pine forests. He walked. He found the nearest MARTA train station after 45 minutes of steady strides. The night train was eerily quiet. Reacher sat alone in the car, the pale fluorescent lights reflecting his angular face on the dark window. Buckhead, the neighborhood of old money and new money. Skyscrapers of glass and steel, upscale shopping centers and five-star hotels. 3:45 a.m. Reacher stepped out of the Lenox station. The streets were silent, clean to the point of sterility. No trash, no homeless people. Security cameras mounted on every lamppost, electronic eyes with blinking red LEDs in rhythm. He found the building printed on the parking ticket. Lenox Square Towers. It was a mixed-use complex. 3 floors below were a shopping center, and 20 floors above were luxury apartments and office spaces for rent. The building was wrapped in black glass, reflecting the streetlights like a massive black quartz block. Reacher stood in the darkness of a bus stop across the street, observing. The main entrance was locked. A uniformed security guard sat yawning behind the marble reception desk. The garage entrance was on the side of the building. The steel roll-up door was tightly shut. There was a card reader. Reacher had no card. He also had no intention of knocking to inquire. He walked around to the back, the loading area. This area was darker. Large industrial trash bins lined up. A garbage truck was backing in, the beeping sound echoing in the empty alley. Reacher waited. The garbage truck stopped. 2 sanitation workers jumped down, pulling the overflowing trash bins towards the compactor at the back of the truck. The roar of the hydraulic engine drowned out all other sounds. The roll-up door of the loading area was opening to allow the sanitation workers to work. Reacher moved. He did not run. He walked quickly, taking advantage of the darkness of the truck as a blind spot. As the 2 workers were busy with the compactor lever, Reacher glided past them like a gentle breeze, disappearing into the concrete corridor of the technical area. 3 seconds. No one saw him. Inside the corridor reeked of garbage and industrial cleaner. Reacher followed the green emergency exit signs. Service elevator. He pressed the button to call the elevator. The doors opened immediately. The interior was lined with felt panels for moving items. Reacher stepped inside. The control panel had a card reader for floors above the third. He had no card, but he knew the safety mechanism of the elevator. He looked up at the ceiling of the elevator, a square emergency hatch. Reacher jumped up, gripping the edge of the hatch, pushing hard. The hatch was not locked. It swung open. He pulled himself up onto the elevator roof. The space was pitch dark, filled with grease and cables. The wind howled from the deep elevator shaft. He looked at the pulley system. Reacher searched for the control box on top of the elevator car. He flipped the switch to inspect. The elevator stopped operating according to the normal floor call. He pressed the UP button on the manual control box. The elevator car slowly moved upward. Reacher stood on top, watching the floor numbers painted on the concrete wall pass by. Floor 1, Floor 2, Floor 3, Floor 4. Reacher released the button. The elevator stopped. He unlocked the mechanical lock of the floor door from inside the shaft, a technique he learned from the counterterrorism special forces, using a long metal rod to trip the latch. The door to Floor 4 creaked open. Reacher jumped down onto the thickly carpeted hallway floor. Absolute silence. The hallway was wide with oak paneling and wall sconces casting warm yellow light. He walked down the hallway counting the room numbers. 401, 402, 403. Unit 404. The thick mahogany door. No peephole. Electronic lock with a code. Reacher did not attempt to guess the code. There were 10,000 combinations. He had no time. He pressed his ear against the door. The sound of a computer's cooling fan running softly. The faint clicking of a keyboard. There was someone inside. Reacher stepped back 3 paces. He calculated. The door was made of solid wood, reinforced with a steel frame. Kicking it open would make a noise like a bomb going off. He looked up at the hallway ceiling. Smoke detector. Reacher pulled out the matchbook he had taken from the Waffle House. He lit a match, holding it just below the smoke detector, 2 meters from door 404. 5 seconds later, beep, beep, beep. The local fire alarm blared loudly. The firelight flashed. Reacher extinguished the match, pressing himself into the wall recess, leading to the stairwell 3 meters from door 404. The door to 404 swung open. A man stepped out, a frown on his face, holding a partially closed laptop. He wore a t-shirt, shorts, and thick glasses. Not a mercenary, a technician. He scanned the hallway, trying to locate the source of the smoke. "What the hell?" he muttered. Reacher stepped out of the shadows. The technician turned back, eyes wide behind thick glasses. He saw a nearly 2-meter-tall wall of a man charging towards him. Reacher did not use a fist. He used an open palm, pushing hard into the technician's chest, sending him stumbling back into the room. Reacher followed in, slamming the door shut behind him. The fire alarm outside was significantly muffled by the soundproofing of the upscale apartment. The technician fell backward onto the floor, the laptop sliding across the glossy wooden surface. "Don't scream," Reacher said. His voice was low and smooth, but contained a threat strong enough to freeze the blood in the veins. The room was not a residence. It was a miniature data center. The windows were covered with black curtains. 3 rows of servers hummed loudly against the wall. A large desk with 6 computer monitors displayed complex graphs and continuously running lines of code. On the wall was a world map with blinking red dots. Reacher stepped over the trembling technician and walked to the desk. He looked at the main screen. Window title Project Vector, Phase 2 Trial. Data displayed subject group Rodentia, status completed, subject group Human, status 1-on-1, Reacher squinted, 1-on-1. He looked down at the caption below. Subject 0S. Zane, time of infection 14 days ago, cause of death drowning. Steffi Zane was not killed because she knew too much. She was killed because she was a host. Or did she die of illness, and the drowning was just to cover up the symptoms? Reacher grabbed the technician by the collar, lifting him up off the chair. "Explain," Reacher ordered, pointing at the screen. I'm just the data entry guy," the technician stammered, sweat pouring down, fogging his glasses. "They pay me to monitor the servers. Who are they? The corporation, New York. I don't know the real names. They call themselves the board. What is Project Vector? The technician swallowed hard. Virus. Genetic modification. They use rats for breeding. Zane's rats have a similar immune system. And Steffi, Zane, she had an accident in her husband's lab. A bite. Arthur Zane reported it up. They ordered. The technician paused, trembling. They ordered the destruction of the specimen. Reacher finished the sentence. A chill ran down his spine. Steffi Zane was considered a specimen. Arthur Zane had allowed his wife to be killed not just for money, but because he feared the virus spreading and dreaded the wrath of the board of directors. Reacher looked back at the world map. The red dots. What are these dots? Distribution points, the technician whispered. Phase 2. Widespread testing. Reacher examined closely. One red dot was flashing right at Atlanta, another dot in Chicago, one dot in Washington, D.C. When did it start? 6 this morning, he said, glancing at the digital clock on the screen. The first shipment has left the warehouse. The clock in Reacher's mind reported 4:30 a.m., an hour and a half left. Where's the warehouse? Reacher asked, tightening his grip on the technician's collar. The airport. DeKalb Peachtree Airport. Hangar number 9. They use private planes for transport. Reacher released him. He pulled out a pocket knife from his pants. He didn't stab the guy. He plunged the knife into the hard drive of the main server. Sparks flew. The screen went dark. He smashed the laptop with a hammer-like punch. "Stay put," Reacher said to the cowering technician. "If you touch the phone, I'll come back, and next time I won't use my hands." Reacher turned and walked out of the room. DeKalb Peachtree Airport. A private airport. 8 miles to the northeast. He needed a car. Fast. Reacher ran down the hallway, down the stairs. He wouldn't use the elevator again. Out on the street, he saw a taxi dropping off a passenger at the nearby Intercontinental Hotel. Reacher rushed over, opening the door just as the passenger stepped out. To PDK Airport, Reacher said to the driver, "I'll pay $100 if you get there in 15 minutes. The driver, a bearded Russian guy, glanced at the $100 bill Reacher held up in the rearview mirror. "Buckle up, cowboy," he said, flooring the gas. The car sped off, tearing through the Atlanta night. Reacher looked out the window. The fight was no longer about a murder in a small town. It had escalated into a national disaster, and Reacher was the only line of defense. Part 11. The taxi stop at the south gate of DeKalb Peachtree Airport, 5:02 a.m. Reacher tossed the $100 bill onto the front seat. He didn't wait for change. He stepped out, closing the car door gently. The wind howled across the runway, carrying the strong smell of Jet A-1 fuel. PDK Airport was quiet, but not asleep. The blue and white runway lights stretched out like beads in the darkness. Reacher stood close to the security fence. The B-40 steel mesh was 2.5 meters high, with 3 rows of barbed wire angled 45 degrees outward at the top, he observed. 100 meters away, an airport security patrol car was moving slowly. The yellow light was spinning on the roof. Reacher pulled out the pocket knife he had obtained at the rest stop. The stainless steel blade was sharp. He wedged the blade into the mesh eye near the concrete post where the tension was greatest. He twisted his wrist. Snap. One mesh eye was cut. He worked quickly and accurately. 15 seconds. An L-shaped gap wide enough for an average person to crawl through. Reacher was not an average person. He needed to cut an additional 10 centimeters. He slipped through. The denim jacket brushed against the sharp barbed wire. He was now in the controlled airspace. Reacher moved low, using the shadows of the hangars as cover. He ran in a military-style short sprints, stop, observe, then sprint again. Hangar number 9 was located in the isolated northern area designated for premium charter flights. 5:15. Reacher hid behind an old Cessna 172 propeller plane parked outdoors. He looked over at Hangar 9. The enormous roll-up door was wide open. The bright halogen light spilled out onto the tarmac, illuminating it as bright as day. A white Gulfstream G550 jet was waiting. The engines were running the high-pitched whine of the Rolls-Royce jet turbine, tearing through the quiet space. Activity was bustling. A cargo truck was backing up close to the aircraft's cargo door. 4 men in white medical protective suits were transferring silver metal containers from the truck to the plane. Each container bore an orange biohazard warning symbol, biohazard. Guards, Reacher counted. 2 guys stood at the hangar door. 2 guys stood next to the aircraft stairs. 1 guy sat in a Jeep Wrangler parked 20 meters away watching the perimeter. They all carried H&K MP-5K submachine guns, compact firing at a rate of 900 rounds per minute, weapons of professionals, Reacher calculated. 5 gunmen, 4 loading staff, 2 pilots in the cockpit, a total of 11 opponents. He had no gun, he only had a pocket knife and 2 fists. The odds were bad, but Reacher had the darkness. And he had the element of surprise. The guy sitting in the Jeep was the weakest link. He was smoking. The red ember flickered in the dark cabin. He was complacent, thinking the perimeter was secure. Reacher moved around to the back of the Jeep. He walked on the balls of his feet, the soft rubber soles absorbing any sound. He approached the driver's side door. The window was rolled down halfway to let out the smoke. Reacher did not hesitate. He reached in with his left hand, grabbed the guard's hair, and yanked his head against the window frame. Thud, a dull and crisp sound. The guard slumped over the steering wheel. The car horn was about to sound, but Reacher's right hand had already wedged between the guard's chest and the wheel, preventing his body weight from pressing on the horn. Reacher opened the car door. He pulled the guard out, laying him down on the ground in the shadow of the rear wheel. He searched thoroughly. An MP-5K hung in front of his chest, 2 spare magazines, a walkie-talkie. Reacher removed the gun. He checked it. The safety was on. The magazine was full. 30 rounds of 9mm parabellum. He took 2 more magazines and stuffed them into his jacket pocket. Now the odds had changed. Reacher crawled into the driver's seat of the Jeep. He did not close the door. He observed through the windshield. The loading was almost complete. Only 2 last crates remained. The clock in Reacher's mind registered 5:25. If the plane took off, the virus would spread. Chicago, Washington, New York, millions would die. Reacher could not let that Gulf Stream leave the ground. He looked at the Jeep's dashboard. The key was still in the ignition. Reacher had an idea. Simple, brutal, effective. He started the vehicle. The 3.6-liter V6 engine roared. The guards at the hangar door turned to look. They had not raised the alarm. They thought their teammate was moving. Reacher shifted into gear. He floored the accelerator. The Jeep lunged forward, speeding away. The target was not the soldiers. The target was the Gulf Stream. More specifically, the nose gear. A distance of 60 meters. The vehicle accelerated to 50 kilometers per hour. 60, 70. The soldiers began to shout. Gunfire erupted. Rat-a-tat-tat. Bullets ricocheted off the hood, shattering the windshield. Reacher ducked low, gripping the steering wheel tightly. 10 meters. Reacher opened the door and hurled himself out. He rolled on the hard concrete, the friction tearing his denim jacket, scraping his shoulder and hip. The driverless Jeep barreled straight into the nose gear of the jet. Crash. The terrible sound of impact. Metal grinding against metal. The Jeep's front end was crushed. The Gulfstream's nose gear crumpled under the 2-ton impact. The nose of the plane collapsed, slamming hard onto the runway. The spinning jet engine's propeller was jolted, scraping the ground, sparking and shattering into pieces. The plane tilted sharply to one side. Fuel began to leak from the broken right wing. Chaos. Reacher sprang up from behind the portable generator. He drew the MP-5K. Shoot him! Shoot that bastard! The shout came from the hangar. The 4 remaining gunmen spread out, seeking cover behind crates and steel columns. They began firing wildly at the generator. Bullets whizzed around Reacher. The sound of tearing metal was deafening. Reacher did not return fire immediately. He waited. He counted the enemy's shots. 1 burst. 2 bursts. Reloading. A soldier dressed in black, wearing a baseball cap, moved out from the side to approach from the left. Mistake. Reacher rose up. He switched the safety to single shot mode. He aimed. The distance was 30 meters. Bang! A 9mm bullet pierced the soldier's chest. He fell backward, his gun flying away. Reacher ducked down. 3 left. The smell of jet. A fuel was more pungent. A small spark from the broken engine could turn this area into a massive fireball. Reacher saw the silver barrels containing the virus rolling on the runway, ejected from the cargo hold after the impact. A few were dented. If they were punctured, disaster would begin right here. Reacher needed to finish this quickly. He pulled the pin from the stun grenade he found in the tactical vest pocket of the Jeep guard, a detail he had just realized when he searched more thoroughly earlier. He threw the grenade towards the hangar door, where 2 gunmen were hiding behind the frame. Boom! A blinding white light, accompanied by a deafening explosion. 2 soldiers clutched their ears, staggering out of their hiding spots, completely disoriented. Reacher stood up. 2 shots! Pop! Pop! The 2 men fell down. Neatly. Only 1 left. He stood next to the airplane stairs. He was using his body to shield a man in a suit coming down from the plane. Reacher recognized the man in the suit. Well-groomed hair. Cold face. The one who had spoken to him on the phone at the Dixie Stop rest area. The office. The last guard raised his gun, firing wildly at Reacher to cover his boss's escape. Reacher rolled to the right, taking cover behind a loading truck tire. "Surrender!" the guard shouted. "You're surrounded! Look again!" Reacher called out. "It's just you left!" Reacher heard the sound of a car engine starting in the hangar. A black Lincoln Town car sped out, tires screeching. The man in the suit had abandoned his gunman. The guard turned to look at the fleeing car, momentarily distracted. Reacher seized the opportunity. He fired a short burst of 3 shots. The guard collapsed. The parking lot fell silent again. Only the metallic groans of the aircraft and the sound of the Lincoln's engine fading away towards the north emergency exit remained. Reacher stepped out. He did not chase after the car. He could not catch up on foot. He walked towards the wreckage of the aircraft. A few guys in hazmat suits were huddled together, trembling hands raised in surrender. They were civilians, not combatants. "Don't move," Reacher commanded. Gun aimed straight at them. "Check the cargo containers. If any of them are leaking, you will be the first to die." Reacher walked around the broken wing of the aircraft. Fuel was flowing in a stream. He needed to call the hazardous materials team and the fire department. But first he looked in the direction where the Lincoln had disappeared. The mastermind had escaped, but Reacher knew where he would go. PDK Airport had 2 exits. The northern exit led directly to I-85. Reacher spotted a large motorcycle, a Ducati Monster, parked in the corner of the hangar, belonging to some pilot. He ran over. The keys were missing, but Reacher knew how to hotwire it. 30 seconds later, the L-twin engine roared angrily. Reacher turned back, shouting at the hazmat crew, "Call 911, tell them it's a level 4 biohazard incident." He revved the throttle. The Ducati surged forward, racing after the Lincoln. The clock in Reacher's head ticked 5:35. The race was not over. It had just entered the high-speed phase. The Ducati Monster roared like a wounded beast, speeding down the concrete of I-85. Reacher was not wearing a helmet. The wind whipped against his face at 140 kilometers per hour, making his skin taut and his eyes water. He squinted into 2 narrow slits, shielding his eyes with his thick eyelashes. Ahead, 300 meters away, the taillights of the Lincoln Town car glowed red like 2 embers in the early morning mist. It was running in the far left lane, weaving through the delivery trucks of the early morning. The driver knew he was being pursued. He was driving the 2-ton luxury car as if it were a Ferrari racing car. A mistake. Reacher twisted the throttle. The motorcycle surged forward. The 900cc L-twin engine responded instantly. The acceleration pressed Reacher firmly against the seat. The distance closed. 200 meters. 100 meters. The Lincoln suddenly slammed on the brakes. The brake lights blazed bright. An attempt to shake off the tail. He hoped Reacher would not react in time and crash into the back of the car. Reacher did not brake. He relaxed his elbows, gently pushed the handlebars to the right. The gyroscopic effect caused the Ducati to lean right, gliding past the side of the Lincoln with only 10 centimeters to spare. Reacher saw the panicked face of the man in the suit through the glass of the passenger window. The man in the suit swerved right, trying to force Reacher into the concrete barrier. Reacher braked. The Brembo brakes gripped the steel disc tightly. The car slowed down abruptly. The Lincoln crashed into thin air, the side scraping against the barrier, sparks flying. Reacher shifted gears. He maneuvered to the back, to the left side of the car, the blind spot. He drew the MP5K with his left hand. His right hand still held the throttle. Difficult, dangerous. The recoil of the gun, combined with the motorcycle's vibrations at high speed, made accurate aiming impossible. But Reacher didn't need to hit the head. He needed to hit the car, a target as big as an elephant. He tucked the gun under his arm, aiming the barrel at the left rear tire of the Lincoln. Tap, tap, tap. 3 bullets escaped the barrel. The tires of the new Lincoln Town Car are usually run-flat types, reinforced steel core. It wouldn't burst immediately, but the impact of the 9mm bullet at close range would tear the tire wall, disrupting the dynamic balance. The Lincoln staggered. The rear of the car swayed slightly. The driver made a second mistake. He hit the brakes while the car was losing traction. Physics punished that mistake immediately. The rear of the car slid to the right. The car spun sideways, tires screeching loudly on the pavement, leaving behind charred black rubber streaks. The car crashed violently into the roadside guardrail. The front crumpled. The airbags deployed, filling the space with white. The car bounced back, spinning once more before stopping in the middle of the lane, steam rising from the broken radiator. Reacher eased off the throttle. He stopped the Ducati 10 meters from the wreck. He kicked down the stand and dismounted. Gun in hand, safety off. Traffic on the highway began to spiral into chaos. Trucks behind slammed their brakes, the sound of air horns blaring. Reacher didn't care. He walked towards the Lincoln. The driver's side door was jammed. The glass shattered. Inside, the man in the suit was struggling, trying to escape the deflating airbag. Blood trickled from his forehead onto his pristine white shirt. Reacher yanked the door handle hard, locked. He used the butt of the gun to smash the remaining glass. He reached in, unlocking the latch from the inside. He dragged the man in the suit out like pulling a garbage bag. He threw him onto the cold concrete road. The man groaned, clutching his chest. Ribs broken from the impact. Reacher kicked away the semi-automatic pistol that fell from the man's waistband. He placed one foot on the man's chest, pressing down hard. "Name?" Reacher asked. You're crazy." The man coughed, blood frothing at the corner of his mouth. "You don't know what you've just done." Reacher pressed harder. The sound of cracking bones faintly echoed. "Name?" Reacher repeated. "Vance," the man screamed. "Julian Vance." "Regional executive." "Regional of what?" Titan Biologic, Vance said, his eyes glaring at Reacher with hatred. "The Titan Corporation." Reacher searched Vance's jacket pockets. A satellite phone. A thick leather wallet. "The shipment at PDK has been canceled," Reacher said. "The plane is down. The virus is sealed. It's just one shipment." Vance laughed, a blood-stained smile. "Do you think you can stop the tide with 2 hands? There are 12 other distribution points across the country. Chicago, Seattle, Miami. They received shipments yesterday by road." Reacher felt a chill run down his spine. "Phase 2. "Correct," Vance said. "Field testing. We need data on the spread rate in urban environments." Steffi Zane was a success. She infected 3 others before she died. The virus is functioning perfectly. Does Arthur Zane know this? Arthur thinks it was an accident. He's a fool. He doesn't realize he's helping us create a new generation of biological weapons. Reacher looked down at Vance, a serial killer in an Armani suit, a man who viewed human lives as statistics on an Excel spreadsheet. In the distance, police sirens wailed. The Georgia State Police were arriving at the accident scene. Reacher could not hand Vance over to the police. Titan Biologic would have lawyers. Vance would be out on bail in 2 hours. He would disappear and continue orchestrating the massacre. Reacher watched the line of traffic that was backed up. "You said there are 12 distribution points," Reacher said. "Where's the list?" "In my head," Vance pointed to his temple, "and in the secure server in New York. You'll never get it." Reacher leaned down. He picked up Vance's satellite phone. "Unlock it," Reacher commanded. "No." Reacher aimed his gun at Vance's left knee. "I will shatter every joint in your body, starting from your knee up to your groin, then to your elbow. You will become a talking jellyfish." Vance looked into Reacher's eyes. He saw cold truth. Reacher would do it. No hesitation, no conscience. Vance's hand trembled as he took the phone. He entered the password. Reacher snatched the phone back. He checked it. A security application. Inside was a list of addresses and tracking codes. Chicago Warehouse 7, Michigan Lake Port. Miami Container 442, Dock Number 4, Seattle. Reacher sent all this data to a phone number, the number of Captain Lohman at Griffin's Ridge. Then he sent it to another number, the number of the FBI Atlanta that he remembered from his time as a military police officer. An anonymous message, but with an old military identification code to ensure it was read immediately. Biological terrorism alert, Titan Biologic, target list attached. Vance watched Reacher operate. He realized his career, and possibly his life, had just ended. "Who are you?" Vance asked weakly. "Jack Reacher," he said. "Nobody." The police car had come very close. Reacher saw the red and blue lights reflecting on the wet pavement. He couldn't stay. Reacher threw Vance's phone onto the road, crushing it into plastic shards with the heel of his shoe. "I'll let the police take care of you," Reacher said. "They will find the wreck of the Gulfstream and the pile of viruses at the airport. Your testimony will be very interesting." "They will kill me," Vance whispered, his face drained of blood. "The board. They don't forgive failure." "Then good luck," Reacher said. He turned back to the Ducati. The engine was still idling. Reacher got on the bike. He looked at Vance one last time. The powerful executive was now just a pile of broken meat lying by the roadside waiting for his fate. Reacher shifted into gear. The bike surged forward. He rode against traffic in the emergency lane, weaving through the jam, heading for the nearest exit. The clock in his head reported 6:15 a.m. The sun began to rise. A brilliant orange band appeared on the eastern horizon, dispersing the damp fog. The mission in Atlanta was over, but the list of 12 locations still remained. The FBI would get involved. Titan Biologic would be investigated. The nightmare had been averted, at least for now. Reacher needed to leave the city. He needed to find another bus station. He needed a fresh cup of coffee and perhaps a pastry. Reacher took the Ducati off the highway at the Cheshire Bridge Road exit. This area was suitable. The strip clubs closed during the day, adult shops with blacked-out windows and shabby pawn shops, a place where no one would question a battered man riding an expensive motorcycle. The clock in Reacher's head reported 6:45 a.m. He turned into an alley behind an abandoned warehouse where weeds grew through the cracked concrete, the smell of garbage and stale urine. Reacher stopped the bike. He turned off the engine. The L-twin engine quieted, leaving a sudden silence. He got off the bike. His body ached. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving lactic acid and bruises beginning to swell. His right shoulder throbbed where he had hit the ground at Loras's house. His left hip was scraped from jumping out of the Jeep. Reacher took the hem of his flannel shirt to wipe the handlebars, gas tank, and the plastic parts he had touched, leaving no fingerprints, leaving no DNA if possible. He tossed the keys into a nearby storm drain. The dirty water splashed up with a plop. He stepped out of the alley. Now he was a pedestrian, an invisible man. Reacher walked 2 miles south. He found a gas station with a convenience store. He went into the restroom. He took off his denim jacket. It was torn and stained with dried blood. He crumpled it up and stuffed it deep into a trash can full of dirty paper towels. He washed his face with cold water and cheap pink hand soap. He scrubbed the blood off his forehead, cleansing the soot from the airport explosion. He combed his hair back with wet fingers. In the mirror, a tired but determined face looked back at him. Reacher stepped outside. He was only wearing a plaid flannel shirt and khaki pants. He looked like a night shift worker just off duty. He bought an early edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and a large black coffee. He stood at the corner drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. There was no news about the accident on I-85 or the explosion at the airport. Print news was always 6 hours behind reality, but the TV hanging in the store was not. Reacher looked through the glass. CNN's Morning News. The headline scrolling across the screen read, "Biological alert at PDK Airport. FBI secures the scene." Aerial footage showed helicopters, fire trucks spraying white foam over the wreckage of the Gulfstream G550. Dozens of workers in yellow protective gear were moving metal containers onto specialized trucks. The footage shifted to a reporter standing in front of an office building in Buckhead. The FBI has just executed an emergency search warrant at the Lenox Square building. Sources say this is part of a large-scale counter-terrorism operation. Reacher nodded slightly. His message had been received. The FBI did not waste time when they heard the words biological weapon. Titan Biologic was being dissected. He drained his coffee cup. He tossed the cup into the trash can. He needed to make a call. One last call to confirm the only loose lead left. Reacher found a rare remaining payphone outside a laundromat. He dropped in 35 cents. He dialed the Griffin's Ridge Sheriff's Office. Sheriff's Office Burns speaking. The voice came through, sounding tense. "Put me through to Lohman," Reacher said. "Who is this?" "Tell him it's the garbage burner." Silence for 2 seconds. The sound of the line switching. Reacher Lohman's voice came through deep and weary. "What's the situation?" Reacher asked. Chaotic, Lohman said. "The FBI has flooded my town. They are searching Zane's warehouse. They are searching Loras's house." "How's Arthur Zane?" "He's talking," Lohman said, his voice a bit smug. "When he heard the FBI was coming in, he cracked. He spilled everything. About Steffi. About the virus. About the money. He's trying to negotiate to avoid being poisoned." "What about Vance? State Police found him next to the Lincoln wreck. 6 broken ribs, punctured lung. He's in the ICU at Grady Memorial with 2 FBI agents guarding the door 24/7. "Good," Reacher said. Reacher Lohman hesitated. "In the list of 12 locations you sent, the FBI raided them all at 6 a.m. They seized everything. No containers were leaking. You saved a lot of lives. That's their job," Reacher said. "They want to find you," Lohman warned. "The lead agent wants to talk to the key witness. They are reviewing traffic cameras. Tell them I don't like to talk." "I told them I didn't know who you were," Lohman said. "I told them you were just a guy hitchhiking through town. Name's Jack. Something. I forgot." Reacher slightly smirked. Lohman was a good cop, an old dog who kept his word. "Thank you, Captain." And Reacher Lohman added, "About Helen Cragg, she's not involved." "I know. This morning she came to report a missing gun. I took the report. The file will sit at the bottom of my drawer forever. Goodbye, Lohman." Reacher hung up. Every lead had been tied up. Zane was in jail. Vance was arrested. The virus was confiscated. The good people were safe. The clock in Reacher's head marked 8 in the morning. The city of Atlanta was fully waking up. The stream of commuters began to flood the streets, bustling and noisy. Reacher blended into that crowd. He was tall, noticeable, but he knew how to move so that no one paid attention. He walked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going, even if he didn't have a specific destination yet. He needed to leave Georgia. The Greyhound station in downtown Atlanta was too dangerous. The FBI would be watching there. Hartsfield-Jackson Airport was even worse. Reacher decided to head west. He caught a downtown bus route 12 to the last stop in the western suburbs of the city. From there he would walk to the I-20 highway, heading towards Alabama, Birmingham, or further, Mississippi, Texas. America is vast, and Reacher always had places to go. He sat in the back seat of the downtown bus. He looked out the window. The skyscrapers of Atlanta receded behind him, shrinking, then disappearing behind the red clay hills. Reacher closed his eyes. He began to calculate the distance. 350 miles to Birmingham. Average walking speed 4 miles per hour. Hitchhiking probability 60%. The numbers comforted him. They were simple, they were logical. Unlike people, Reacher did not feel elated. He did not feel proud, he only felt hungry. The last time he ate was in Macon. Eggs and bacon, all converted into energy for the fight. He needed an early lunch. Part 14. The sun hung high overhead. The midday sun blazed, scorching the asphalt of the I-20 highway. Reacher was walking on the gravel sidewalk, heading west. He had walked 3 miles from the downtown bus station. The back of his flannel shirt was soaked with sweat. The bruises on his ribs and hips began to signal pain with each step. The adrenaline had run out, leaving pure physical exhaustion. The clock in Reacher's head struck 12:15. His stomach was empty. His body was demanding fuel to repair the damaged muscle tissue. He needed protein, he needed caffeine, and he needed painkillers. A green billboard appeared ahead, Exit 44, Thornton Road. Below were the familiar symbols of American highway culture: a Shell gas station, a Motel 6, and a Waffle House. Not Waffle House. He had eaten there last night. He needed something more substantial. Next to the Waffle House sign was an older hand-painted sign, Bubba's Barbecue and Grill. Reacher took the exit. Bubba's was a 1-story wooden house with a rusted tin roof nestled in the vast gravel parking lot. The smell of smoked oak barbecue wafted from the brick chimney in the back, fragrant and inviting. Reacher pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was dark and cool inside. The air conditioning was running at full blast. The wooden floor was covered in sawdust. Sturdy pine tables and chairs filled the space. On the walls hung deer heads, old license plates, and a Confederate flag. The place was crowded, mostly truck drivers and road workers. The clatter of forks and knives against porcelain plates, the booming laughter and conversation, and the country music playing from the jukebox in the corner filled the air. Reacher chose a solitary table in a secluded corner. The standard tactical position back against the wall facing the door. A young waitress with blonde hair tied in a ponytail placed a menu on the table. "What can I get you, brother?" she asked, her thick southern accent stretching out the vowels. "Coffee," Reacher said. "Black, and a large bottle of water, coming right up." "And food," Reacher continued. "I want the biggest slab of ribs you have. Add half a roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and cornbread." The girl blinked, taking in Reacher's size. "You look hungry. I skipped breakfast." The girl took notes and quickly headed toward the kitchen. Reacher leaned back in his chair. He stretched his legs out under the table. His knees cracked slightly. He closed his eyes for 10 seconds, listening to his heartbeat, 60 beats per minute, steady. He opened his eyes as the girl returned with a coffee pot and a cold bottle of mineral water. Reacher drained the bottle in one go. He needed to rehydrate after the chase and walking in the sun. Then he poured himself some coffee. At the next table, 3 men in suits were having lunch. They were loudly discussing real estate and land prices. On their table was a copy of USA Today. Reacher caught sight of the headline on the front page, folded back. "Biological Terrorism or Airline Accident, FBI investigates explosion at PDK." Reacher didn't need to read the article. He knew the truth. He was the one who had written that truth. 15 minutes later, the food was brought out. A large aluminum tray filled with glistening barbecue ribs, steaming hot. Reacher ate. He ate with focus and efficiency. He cut the meat, brought it to his mouth, chewed thoroughly, and swallowed. Not in a hurry, but not wasting any motion. Protein and fat were being replenished in his body, fuel for the fire. As he finished the last rib, the door of the restaurant swung open. 2 highway patrol officers walked in. They wore wide-brimmed hats, sunglasses, and had Glock 22 handguns at their hips. The atmosphere in the diner dampened a bit. Truck drivers lowered their heads to their plates. No one liked the presence of police while they were trying to relax, even if they had done nothing wrong. The 2 officers scanned the room with their eyes. Reacher did not lower his head. He still held his fork, spearing a piece of potato. He looked at them. The gaze of the lead officer landed on Reacher. He looked at the crisp work clothes, but noticed the old dirty shoes. He observed the scratches on Reacher's face. He nudged his partner. They walked over to Reacher's table. Reacher set down his knife and fork. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had a habit of finding him. "Hey there, buddy," the lead officer said, leaning on the table. "You're not from around here." "I'm just passing through," Reacher said. "Where to west? How are you getting there?" The officer looked out the window at the parking lot. "I don't see a vehicle that fits you out there. I'm walking." "Walking on I-20 is against the law," the officer said. "The highway prohibits pedestrians." "I was on the service road," Reacher lied. A technical lie. "ID," Reacher sighed inwardly. He pulled out the wallet of the assassin. The driver's license was in the name of Richard Kane. The officer took it, examining it. "Atlanta. You look a bit worse for wear, Mr. Kane. Been in a fight." "Bicycle accident," Reacher said. "Last week." The officer returned the license. He didn't believe it, but the ID was valid. And Reacher was having an expensive lunch, which meant he had money to pay, not a homeless beggar. "Finish up and get going," the officer said, his tone warning. "We don't want to see you wandering on the highway." "Of course," Reacher said. "The coffee here is very good." The two officers walked away, sitting down at a table on the other side of the diner. Reacher finished his cup of coffee. He was full, but he wasn't done with his business. He waved to the waitress. "The bill," he said. "And do you sell aspirin?" "We have a vending machine near the restroom," she said. 25 cents for 2 tablets. Reacher paid for his meal with a $50 bill. "Keep the change." He walked over to the vending machine. He put in a handful of coins. He bought 4 packs, 8 aspirin tablets. He peeled the wrapper, tossed all 8 pills into his mouth, and washed them down with the last gulp of water. A dosage sufficient to thin the blood and numb the screaming nerve endings. Reacher stepped out of the diner. The afternoon sun had softened a bit. The wind blew, stirring up dust that hovered just above the ground. He walked to the edge of the parking lot, where it led to a side road merging onto the highway. An old Ford F-250 pickup truck, loaded with dry hay in the back, was idling as it left the lot. The driver was an elderly black man with a patchy white beard. Reacher gave a thumbs up. The truck slowed down. The old man looked at Reacher and nodded. Reacher opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat. "Where are you headed, son?" the old man asked. "Birmingham," Reacher said. "That's quite a long way," the old man chuckled, revealing a set of missing teeth. "But I'm headed that way too. Hop in." The truck rolled out, leaving Bubba's barbecue behind, climbing the slope onto I-20 West. Reacher glanced in the rearview mirror. The diner receded behind them. 2 police cars were still parked there. Griffin's Ridge was 100 miles behind. Atlanta was 50 miles back. Arthur Zane, Julian Vance, Titan Biologic. All were now just the past. Names that would sink into the FBI's archives. Reacher had no luggage. He had no ties. He only had $800 in his pocket, a full stomach, and the open road ahead. He rested his head against the rattling window. He had become a ghost once more. Part 15. The Ford F-250 stopped on the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama. It was getting dark. Low, lead-colored clouds hovered in the sky, signaling another night of rain. In the distance, the smokestacks of old steel mills rose like blackened fingers clawing at the gray sky. "This is where my road ends," the old driver said, pulling the car over near a shabby Greyhound bus station next to the train tracks. Reacher opened the door. He stepped out. The wind whipped against his face, carrying the characteristic smell of coal, dust, and sulfur of an industrial city. "Thanks for the ride," Reacher said. "Be careful, son," the old man said. "Birmingham isn't friendly at night." "I'm not friendly either," Reacher replied. The old man chuckled, shifted gears. The old truck shuddered and rolled away, disappearing into the descending night. Reacher stood alone on the cracked sidewalk. The clock in his head read 6:15 p.m. He pulled out the leather wallet of the assassin, Julian Vance. The driver's license bore the name Richard Kane. A credit card, vehicle registration. Reacher walked to a storm drain at the corner of the street. He dropped the wallet through the iron grate. It plopped down into the murky water below. Richard Kane is dead. Jack Reacher is back. He walked into the bus station. Inside the waiting room, the fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing like a dying insect. The floor was covered in yellowed tiles, sticky with black chewing gum. A few weary passengers were dozing off on the rows of hard plastic seats. Reacher approached the ticket counter. The ticket seller was a plump woman reading a tabloid magazine about the personal lives of Hollywood stars. "Where's the next trip to?" Reacher asked. The woman looked up, pushing her glasses down her nose. She stared at Reacher. A giant in a plaid shirt, dusty khaki pants, with a chiseled face and cold eyes. "West or north?" she asked, her voice bored. "West," Reacher said. "There's a trip to Memphis at 7 o'clock, and a trip to Little Rock at 8:30. "Memphis," Reacher said. "One-way ticket, $58. Reacher pulled a roll of cash from his pocket. He counted the money. His war chest still had over $600. Enough for a few days on the road, enough for coffee and cheap motels. He placed the money on the counter. The woman printed the ticket, sliding it through the glass along with the change. "Bus number 404, she said. "Gate 3. Reacher took the ticket. The number 404 reminded him of the apartment in Buckhead. Remembered the trembling technician and the red dot map. That was all done. Arthur Zane would face the justice of the legal system he once scorned. Lohman would receive commendation. Helen Cragg would continue to heal dogs, cats, and horses in Griffin's Ridge, with a secret buried in the police records. And Steffi Zane, she had been returned her real name. No longer the nameless corpse floating in the river, no longer a test subject. She was a victim of a crime, and that crime had been punished. That was all Reacher could do. He could not bring the dead back to life. He could only make the living regret what they had done. Reacher walked to the vending machine. He bought a cup of coffee, a thin paper cup. Black coffee, hot bitter, with the taste of burnt beans, but it was coffee. He took a sip, leaning against a concrete pillar, looking out at the parking lot through the dusty glass. The bus to Memphis was backing into the bay. The diesel engine growled. The air brake squealed like the sigh of a metal beast. Reacher saw his reflection in the glass. Alone, free, no baggage, no ties. He owned no house, owned no car, owned no comfy sofas or lawns to mow. He did not worry about electric bills, income taxes, or what the neighbors thought. He owned himself, and he owned the road. The bus door opened. The driver stepped down, lighting a cigarette. Reacher finished his cup of coffee. He tossed the cup into the trash can, a perfect throw from 3 meters away. He walked to gate 3. The night wind blew stronger, sweeping along the old newspapers scattered on the concrete floor. Reacher stepped onto the bus. He walked to the back, choosing his familiar seat, on the right, next to the window. The bus shuddered. The door closed. Reacher leaned his head against the cool glass. The bus rolled away, leaving the station accelerating to merge onto the highway. The lights of Birmingham faded into the distance. The utility poles along the road rushed by like the beats of a sad song. Ahead lay the endless night. Ahead was Memphis, and then Arkansas, Texas, California. The world is vast, and there are always wrongs that need to be righted. Reacher closed his eyes. The clock in his head signaled 7 p.m. He fell asleep.